Hello, and thank you for choosing this clean historical Western romance by Emma Ashwood. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support allows us to keep sharing more wonderful stories for free. So grab a cozy spot, kick back, and let this story whisk you away to a different time and place. Enjoy. Copyright Emma Ashwood. Out West for Christmas by Emma Ashwood, Chapter 1. 25th of December 1881, 5 Points, New York. The meat looks wonderful. Harper Scott smiled as her sister set the beef on the table. It was browned to perfection, the aroma making Harper's stomach growl with anticipation. Thank goodness I didn't ruin it. I'm not sure when we'll be able to afford another joint like this, Grace said as she stood back and admired the meal. It had taken weeks of saving every spare penny to be able to spoil themselves with a small feast for Christmas. Harper had taken in extra sewing, and her sister Grace had worked extra shifts at the factory. Grace's husband Jack had also worked extra shifts at the docks to be able to contribute to their Christmas feast. Considering that no one had taught either Harper or Grace how to cook such a large piece of beef, the achievement was all the more of an accomplishment. Harper and Grace had lost their parents when Harper was just 10 years old. Grace had been 16 at the time and had taken Grace under her wing and had cared for her ever since. Although there had been nights they had gone to bed hungry, days where the cold had almost consumed them alive, and months when they had lived on the streets, they had always stayed together. In a place like 5 Points, New York, that was a triumph. When Grace met Jack Young 4 years ago, Harper had known their lives were about to change. Grace had fallen in love with Jack without hesitation, and Jack felt the same for Grace. They had married on a rainy Thursday afternoon, exactly 3 months after first meeting. They all moved into a 2-bedroom tenement apartment in a better neighborhood of 5 Points. Although Grace and Jack made a point not to let Harper feel excluded in any way, Harper couldn't help but feel that they would have enjoyed more privacy at times. "You make a wonderful wife, Grace. Jack is blessed to have you in his life." Harper praised her sister with a loving smile. "And we're blessed to have you in ours. I can't wait to give Jack his gift," Grace gushed. Harper laughed. "It's adorable that you're still so in love. And one day, you're going to be as well," Grace promised. Harper doubted that reassurance. She was 20 years old and was yet to even meet a man who caused her heart to skip a beat. She had attended a few dances with friends, but had never been invited to actually dance. In fact, she doubted she had even been seen sitting in the corner. Harper was a long way from giving up on love. But was it wrong of her to have become a little impatient? She loved Jack and her sister, but she too wanted to start her life with dreams of her own. The door opened and Jack walked in. He shook the snow off his shoulders, reminding Harper of a dog drying himself after being caught in the rain. "Afternoon, ladies. Don't go out there. I could almost swear a blizzard is blowing in." Harper glanced out the window and couldn't help but agree. "It looks right dreadful outside." "It is," Jack agreed as he took off his coat. "Is it ready?" he asked with wide eyes, moving towards the table. "Yes, it is. We were just waiting on you," Grace said before pecking her husband on the cheek. "Gifts or food first?" "Kick me in the head and call me a donkey. This might just be the best Christmas I've ever had. To have a feast and gifts? I knew I did the right thing when I married ya." Jack scooped Grace up and swung her in a circle before setting her down. It warmed Harper's heart to see her sister so happy. "Gifts first," Grace insisted, moving towards the sitting area with a small tree in the corner under which were the few gifts wrapped in newspaper. It was the first time since Grace and Harper had lost their parents that they had gifts beneath the Christmas tree. A smile curved her mouth as she realized that their luck was finally turning. She remembered Christmases with only a chunk of stale bread to share, and now they had beef and roast potatoes. "Here, Harper, this is for you." Grace handed Harper a small gift. Harper frowned, curious about the small package. She carefully tore the newspaper off and found a tiny box inside. She lifted the lid and felt her eyes well with tears. "Grace, this must have cost a fortune." She looked up to find Grace and Jack smiling at her with affectionate gazes. It was a silver necklace, and the pendant was a dollar coin. It was the most beautiful piece of jewelry Harper had ever seen in her life. And it was hers. "Don't you worry about that. Jack and I decided together that we wanted to spoil you. We chose $1 to remind you that your dreams are priceless and that you are priceless to us," Grace said, reaching for Harper's hand and squeezing it tightly. "My gifts are worthless in comparison to this," Harper apologized, brushing away a tear. "It's the thought that counts," Jack reminded her. One by one, they continued to open gifts. Harper had given Jack a new pipe, and for Grace, a hair comb. Harper also received a fragrance bar of soap. One gift remained underneath the tree, and Grace offered it to Jack. Harper felt as if she was intruding, judging by the look of pure love on her sister's face. "What's this?" Jack asked curiously. "Open it," Grace encouraged him. Jack opened the gift and frowned before he gasped. "We're having a baby?" Grace's laughter was accompanied by tears of joy. "Yes, I went by to see the doctor yesterday just to be sure, but come summer we'll have a baby." Harper waited until the soon-to-be parents had shared their special moment before she congratulated them. Harper knew her sister would make a wonderful mother, and Jack would be a loving father. When they sat down for their Christmas feast, Harper was grateful for all the blessings they had this Christmas. There had been times when she had doubted if God even remembered them, but seeing the joy on her sister's face reassured her that he was certainly present. While they ate, Jack and Grace talked about the baby. They suggested names and spoke of cribs, all the while smiling like happy fools. If Harper had started to wonder if it was time for her to move on and out on her own, that moment over Christmas dinner confirmed it for her. She loved her sister dearly, but it was time for her sister and Jack to be a real family, and it was time for Harper to find her own happily ever after. Chapter 1. 25th of December 1881, 5 Points, New York. "The meat looks wonderful." Harper Scott smiled as her sister set the beef on the table. It was browned to perfection, the aroma making Harper's stomach growl with anticipation. "Thank goodness I didn't ruin it. I'm not sure when we'll be able to afford another joint like this," Grace said as she stood back and admired the meal. It had taken weeks of saving every spare penny to be able to spoil themselves with a small feast for Christmas. Harper had taken in extra sewing, and her sister Grace had worked extra shifts at the factory. Grace's husband Jack had also worked extra shifts at the docks to be able to contribute to their Christmas feast. Considering that no one had taught either Harper or Grace how to cook such a large piece of beef, the achievement was all the more of an accomplishment. Harper and Grace had lost their parents when Harper was just 10 years old. Grace had been 16 at the time and had taken Grace under her wing and had cared for her ever since. Although there had been nights they had gone to bed hungry, days where the cold had almost consumed them alive, and months when they had lived on the streets, they had always stayed together. In a place like 5 Points, New York, that was a triumph. When Grace met Jack Young 4 years ago, Harper had known their lives were about to change. Grace had fallen in love with Jack without hesitation, and Jack felt the same for Grace. They had married on a rainy Thursday afternoon, exactly 3 months after first meeting. They all moved into a 2-bedroom tenement apartment in a better neighborhood of 5 Points. Although Grace and Jack made a point not to let Harper feel excluded in any way, Harper couldn't help but feel that they would have enjoyed more privacy at times. "You make a wonderful wife, Grace. Jack is blessed to have you in his life," Harper praised her sister with a loving smile. "And we're blessed to have you in ours. I can't wait to give Jack his gift," Grace gushed. Harper laughed. "It's adorable that you're still so in love. And one day, you're going to be as well," Grace promised. Harper doubted that reassurance. She was 20 years old and was yet to even meet a man who caused her heart to skip a beat. She had attended a few dances with friends, but had never been invited to actually dance. In fact, she doubted she had even been seen sitting in the corner. Harper was a long way from giving up on love. But was it wrong of her to have become a little impatient? She loved Jack and her sister, but she too wanted to start her life with dreams of her own. The door opened and Jack walked in. He shook the snow off his shoulders, reminding Harper of a dog drying himself after being caught in the rain. Afternoon, ladies, don't go out there. I could almost swear a blizzard is blowing in. Harper glanced out the window and couldn't help but agree. It looks right dreadful outside. It is, Jack agreed as he took off his coat. Is it ready? He asked with wide eyes moving towards the table. Yes, it is. We were just waiting on you, Grace said before pecking her husband on the cheek. Gifts or food first? Kick me in the head and call me a donkey. This might just be the best Christmas I've ever had. To have a feast and gifts? I knew I did the right thing when I married ya. Jack scooped Grace up and swung her in a circle before setting her down. It warmed Harper's heart to see her sister so happy. Gifts first. Grace insisted, moving towards the sitting area with a small tree in the corner under which were the few gifts wrapped in newspaper. It was the first time since Grace and Harper had lost their parents that they had gifts beneath the Christmas tree. A smile curved her mouth as she realized that their luck was finally turning. She remembered Christmases with only a chunk of stale bread to share, and now they had beef and roast potatoes. Here, Harper, this is for you. Grace handed Harper a small gift. Harper frowned, curious about the small package. She carefully tore the newspaper off and found a tiny box inside. She lifted the lid and felt her eyes well with tears. Grace, this must have cost a fortune. She looked up to find Grace and Jack smiling at her with affectionate gazes. It was a silver necklace, and the pendant was a dollar coin. It was the most beautiful piece of jewelry Harper had ever seen in her life. And it was hers. Don't you worry about that. Jack and I decided together that we wanted to spoil you. We chose a dollar to remind you that your dreams are priceless and that you are priceless to us. Grace said, reaching for Harper's hand and squeezing it tightly. My gifts are worthless in comparison to this, Harper apologized, brushing away a tear. It's the thought that counts, Jack reminded her. One by one, they continued to open gifts. Harper had given Jack a new pipe and for Grace, a hair comb. Harper also received a fragrance bar of soap. One gift remained underneath the tree, and Grace offered it to Jack. Harper felt as if she was intruding, judging by the look of pure love on her sister's face. What's this? Jack asked curiously. Open it, Grace encouraged him. Jack opened the gift and frowned before he gasped. We're having a baby? Grace's laughter was accompanied by tears of joy. Yes, I went by to see the doctor yesterday just to be sure, but come summer we'll have a baby. Harper waited until the soon-to-be parents had shared their special moment before she congratulated them. Harper knew her sister would make a wonderful mother, and Jack would be a loving father. When they sat down for their Christmas feast, Harper was grateful for all the blessings they had this Christmas. There had been times when she had doubted if God even remembered them, but seeing the joy on her sister's face reassured her that he was certainly present. While they ate, Jack and Grace talked about the baby. They suggested names and spoke of cribs, all the while smiling like happy fools. If Harper had started to wonder if it was time for her to move on and out on her own, that moment over Christmas dinner confirmed it for her. She loved her sister dearly, but it was time for her sister and Jack to be a real family, and it was time for Harper to find her own happily ever after. Chapter 2. 15th January 1882, 5 Points, New York. After Grace's joyous announcement over Christmas dinner, Harper found herself thinking about her own future all the more. She knew that Jack and Grace would never ask her to leave, but Harper couldn't help but feel that she was becoming a burden. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life simply witnessing her sister's dreams being realized. She wanted to realize some dreams of her own. But unlike Grace, who was content to live in 5 Points and build a life there with Jack, Harper had discovered her dreams were more far-reaching. Harper yearned for adventure and excitement, and to see more of the country than just the harbor city where her parents had landed when they had immigrated from Ireland. Her parents had dreamed of moving west to explore the wide-open plains, and Harper found herself wishing for the same. At first, she had considered saving for a train ticket out west, but she soon realized the danger in her plan. A young woman traveling alone to the west without a destination in mind. It was asking for trouble. That's when she remembered a friend mentioning the matrimonial times. Harper had thought it absurd at first. Surely only desperate men advertise themselves like livestock to find wives. But the more Harper considered it, the more she realized becoming a mail-order bride would be the perfect solution to her problem. It would give her the opportunity to travel and see different parts of the country. And when she finally reached her destination, she would have a husband too, would provide her with room and board. No more working shifts in the factories or struggling to make ends meet. For someone who had never experienced love or maternal longings of any kind, it was the perfect solution. She could find a husband who would be more a partner to her than a romantic love interest. Harper had reconsidered this decision numerous times, but the more she inquired about getting her own apartment, the more she realized she simply couldn't afford to move out on her own in 5 Points. Besides, a young woman living alone in 5 Points would be an invitation to trouble, especially the kind of trouble that brewed late at night. That was why this morning she had bought herself a copy of the Matrimonial Times. Knowing that Grace and Jack would arrive home late that afternoon, she took her time scanning the various advertisements. She took her time reading over the character traits each man was searching for. Some of them were simply widowers searching for a wife to mother their children. Then there were those fools who were looking for true love. Here and there she found a strange advertisement that made the hairs on the back of her neck rise. Men she was certain traded in flesh and found it convenient to source their prey between the pages of the Matrimonial Times. She was on the very verge of giving up when she spotted an advertisement that caught her interest enough to have her read it twice. The wording was nowhere near as desperate as some of the other advertisements, and it was clear the man who had placed it wasn't in search of love. Handsome rancher seeking life partner. William Dukestone is a cattle rancher from California. With a large herd, he spends his days on horseback and tending to his cattle. Although William enjoys the life of a rancher, he finds the evenings lonely. He is seeking a young woman of able nature to take as a life partner, someone to help with the chores around the house, someone to keep him company. William doesn't believe that romance can be found through an exchange of letters and has no desire to father children. If you think that you are willing to be a partner to this hardworking rancher, and that you can accept his reticence for romance and refusal to have children, then William looks forward to hearing from you. Harper read the advertisement a third time. A frown creased her brow as she wondered why William would place an advertisement at all if he didn't believe in love or raising a family. He simply wanted a companion and a little help around the house. A smile curved Harper's mouth. That was exactly what she wanted. Someone who didn't expect her to fawn over him and bear him numerous children. Someone who would appreciate her work ethic and expect nothing more of her than a meal and a clean home. Besides, Harper wasn't looking for a husband, true love, or a house filled with children. In fact, she wouldn't mind never having children. She was merely seeking adventure, a different life, and the security of knowing she would have room and board without having to slave hours on end in a factory. For a moment, she hesitated, realizing that perhaps Jack and Grace had come to depend on her income, but she quickly realized that wasn't the case. Although her income was helpful, it didn't even cover her meals. Without having Harper to care for, they would be better off when the baby arrived. Without further consideration, Harper began to write to William Dukestone. When she was done, she mailed the letter before her sister or Jack were around to ask questions, certain that nothing would come of it. Chapter 3, 28th February, 1882, 5 Points, New York. "You're late," Grace commented as Harper walked through the door. "It's almost 10 o'clock. Harper let out an exhausted sigh. Yesterday, Maria and Rosalia were off work with an ailment. So today, Ivor decided to make up for their lack of commitment. We had to finish double the number of garments before we could leave." "That's ridiculous. You've been there since 5 o'clock this morning," Grace said, horrified. Harper shrugged. "At least I have a job. There are many who aren't as blessed." Grace had worked in Ivar's factory for 3 years. By a turn of fate, one of Jack's friends had offered her a position in a dress shop a month ago. Considering Grace's condition, it was a blessing. But Harper still spent her days having Ivar scream and shout for faster production, regardless of how meager the wages were he paid his employees. If Harper had any other choice, she would have told Ivar to sew the garments himself, but like all the other women in the factory, she didn't. I know, but still, I feel guilty for leaving you there alone, Grace admitted. Harper shook her head. Don't. You deserve to work in a dress shop. You have immaculate taste, and I'm sure the society ladies all adore you. I almost forgot. This came for you. Grace stood up and collected an envelope. It's postmarked California? Harper's breath caught as she accepted the letter. He wrote back? Who? Grace asked, confused. It doesn't matter, Harper quickly answered. How could she confess to her sister that she hoped to marry a stranger? It does matter, so tell me, Harper. You've never kept anything from me. Grace reminded her. Harper shrugged. I wrote to one of the men advertising in the Matrimonial Times, Harper admitted. You did what? Grace sounded horrified. Before you chasten me and tell me how irresponsible it is of me, let me explain to you why I did it. Harper gave her sister a pleading look. Fine, but I still won't approve. Grace crossed her arms. Grace, you have Jack. You and Jack are about to be a family, and I'm still just here. I don't have anyone special in my life. I spend 12 hours a day working for Ivar, and I barely have 2 pennies to show for it. I want more from my life. Harper smiled with excitement in her eyes. I want the adventure mother and father spoke of when we were young. I want to see the country. I want more than just this. This? Are you saying that Jack and I aren't enough for you? Grace asked, clearly hurt. Harper smiled kindly at her sister. That's just it, isn't it? You and Jack belong together. I don't belong anywhere. And before you say I belong with you, you know I don't. We'll always be sisters, and I'll always love you, but I have to find my own dreams, build a life of my own. Grace sighed heavily. You're just like our father. He was always talking about chasing his dreams, about finding adventure in the West. I can't help it, Grace. I just know that my happiness isn't here. Not in 5 Points, not in New York, and I can't spend the rest of my life being a spectator to yours. Grace brushed away a tear. Can you at least tell me about the man who wrote you the letter? Harper explained about William Dukestone and his necessity for a companion. Grace frowned and shook her head. Harper, you should be looking for love and someone that wants to have a family with you. That isn't what I want, Harper said firmly. Besides, it's just a letter. No commitments have been made. I hope you'll talk to me before you make any promises. Of course, Harper promised. Now go to bed. You're growing a human. You need your rest. I am, aren't I? Grace smiled tiredly as she laid a hand over her belly. Good night, Harper. Harper made herself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table. She didn't bother with the dinner that her sister had set aside for her. She was too nervous about William's letter to even consider food. She took a deep breath and reached for the letter. Dear Miss Scott, I appreciate you taking the time to write to me. I wasn't sure anyone would be interested in corresponding with me. Most young women yearn for romance and love. They yearn to mother children and to spend their days caring for their young. Although I respect these characteristics, I do not desire to wed for love or to have children. As a man 30 years of age, I find my priorities differ somewhat from other men my age. My ranch is and will always be my most important priority. I have spent years building my herd and creating a life for myself on this ranch. I find great satisfaction in knowing what I have achieved, but it is a lonely life. I find myself seeking out conversation once the ranch hands retire for the day, and I am left to return to an empty cabin. I seek companionship in a wife and a capable housekeeper. In exchange, I will ensure you have your own private room and that you are provided for. I am not sure about your situation, but I can assure you that you will lead a comfortable life. If you can accept the terms of our correspondence, I look very much forward to hearing from you again. Regards, William. Harper smiled as she reached for a pen and a sheet of paper. William Dukestone would make her the perfect husband. Everything in his letter convinced her all the more that he was the man who would offer her the best chance to leave 5 Points in her past forever. Chapter 4. 10th March 1882. Dear William, I hope you aren't offended by the use of your Christian name. I appreciate the honesty in the pages of your letter and can assure you that I share your priorities in so much as they do differ somewhat from the other women of my age. I yearn to see the country, have adventures, and face new challenges. A challenge I never hoped to encounter is having to raise a child. Although I am certain that children bring joy to their parents, I can't help but feel that childcare would be too stifling. I can't imagine spending all my time caring for a young one when there is so much I want to do and so much I still have to learn. Being a rancher sounds like hard work. I can't imagine spending hours on horseback or under the harsh sun. I've heard how the weather out west isn't as kind as it is on the East Coast. If we were to be married, I would gladly take on all the household chores. I appreciate your consideration in offering me my own room. The privacy will be welcomed. Although I enjoy the company of others, I very rarely visit with friends. The only person I consider to be a good friend is my sister Grace. She has raised me for the last 10 years and is the one person I know on whom I can always rely. Yours sincerely, Harper, 4 April 1882. Dear Harper, the adventures you speak of can be dangerous. Traveling across the country isn't as adventurous as you imagine. Among the many dangers I will not mention in this letter are highwaymen and natives seeking revenge. If you do decide to travel west, it would be best to undertake the journey by train. It is much more comfortable, and you will cut out a good many days of travel. As for your sister, I too was blessed with a sister. Anne is only in her 17th year and would gladly befriend you. I might expect you to keep an eye on her while I am away from the ranch to drive cattle to auction twice a year. The weather is, as you say, much harsher in the west. We don't have snow in the winter months, only cooler days with more wind. As for summer, it can stifle some at times. The heat takes your breath away even as you become drenched with your own sweat. Luckily, we have a stream on the ranch where we often bathe on the hottest of days. Although the weather is harsh, the environment brings numerous blessings. The air has the scent of earth and flowers. Birdsong fills the air in summertime, and the vast open spaces allow one the freedom in which to think and to dream. I too have lost both my parents. It is a difficult life, and yet one more reason I refuse to father any children. With kind thoughts, William, 30th April, 1882. Dear William, regardless of the weather, the environment sounds enchanting. I agree that a train journey would be more suitable for such a journey. I would be happy to befriend your sister Anne, as you mentioned in your letter. My sister is currently with child and very eagerly awaiting the arrival of her firstborn. Although she tries to include me in the excitement, I feel it isn't mine. It belongs to her, and her husband and I feel as though I am intruding on this special time in their life. She has made a home for herself and Jack here in 5 Points, and although I am grateful for their hospitality and their grace and acceptance in having me live with them, I know it's time for me to move on. Unfortunately, the wages I earn at the sewing factory simply make it quite impossible for me to afford a safely positioned tenement apartment of my own. Just like you, I work long days, but I am grateful for the employment. There are so many who aren't as blessed, who go to bed facing starvation simply because they can't earn a living. He sent. King Thoughts and Wishes, Harper, 12th June, 1882. Dear Harper, I have heard of the factories in New York. From what I've learned, the conditions aren't very pleasant, and the work seems very demanding. I am sorry that you find yourself in that position, but, as you said, nonetheless grateful that you have gainful employment. Although I too work long hours, I find it very rewarding. I get to see my herd grow and enjoy watching the young calves frolicking together in the fields with the sun on my back. I can stop and rest underneath the shade of an old tree and quench my thirst with fresh water from my very own spring. I can imagine how excited your sister and her husband must be, but I can sympathize that you feel as if you are in the way. I assure you that you will never feel that way on my ranch. Here, you will be welcome and encouraged to make yourself at home while you make a home you can delight in. With fond regards, William. 15 July, 1882. Dear William, in the summer heat, The smog and stench that permeates the streets of Five Points nauseates me. I cannot wait for summer to end. I would welcome the cooler weather. Grace appears to have expanded enormously and is suffering the heat even more than I am. The doctor assures her the baby will arrive before long. In the meantime, I am taking on extra shifts at the factory to help to save for the months when Grace is unable to return to work and to meet the extra expenses that will arise to heat the apartment. Have you told Anne about me and our correspondence? I have confided in Grace, and although she is doubtful about my corresponding with a stranger, she seems invested in my happiness. Do you think I can find happiness in the West, William? I do not seek love or family, but acceptance and knowing that I contribute. I must be rambling because of the heat. Fond thoughts, Harper. 1st August 1882. Dear Harper, I find your ramblings entertaining. The smog and stench sound rightfully terrible. Perhaps you must purchase a vial of musk oil and dab it under your nose to conceal the stench. I once had a ranch hand who couldn't stand the stink of flesh burning when we brand the cattle, and I remember him doing just that. It is kind of you to take on extra work to help your sister with the upcoming expenses of winter and the arrival of the baby. I find you to be kind. I have confided in Anne, and she is anxious to meet you, although I explained that we are in no hurry to make any commitments. Or are you? As for you finding happiness in the West, you might think me odd, but I believe happiness is something we find within ourselves. Of course, our position in life, our location, and our wealth can contribute to it, but happiness is ultimately dependent on gratitude. I believe that you will enjoy living on the ranch and having more independence, but only if you are grateful for what you've overcome and achieved, or for what you dream, will you truly be happy. Regards, William, 20th of August, 1882. Dear William, I agree that without gratitude, no one can truly find happiness. Today I am happy that I am able to correspond with you, for being employed, for having a loving sister, and for having a bed to rest in when nightfall comes. What are you grateful for today? We are preparing for the arrival of Grace's baby any day now. It warms my heart to see my sister so excited, although I can't help but feel anxious about the birth. I know it can be dreadfully dangerous to some. Please keep her in your prayers. As for your question regarding commitment, it's hard to answer a question that hasn't been asked. Send my regards to Anne, Harper. Chapter 5. 1st of September 1882, 5 Points, New York. Something is wrong, I'm sure of it, Jack said, pacing back and forth across their small apartment. Harper smiled at her brother-in-law. Nothing is wrong, Jack. The midwife assured me of it. Giving birth takes time and it hurts. Just as Harper finished her sentence, another cry of pain sounded from the bedroom. But it's been hours, Jack exclaimed, dragging a hand nervously through his hair. She started her pains this morning. Surely something should have happened by now. Harper moved towards him and touched his arm. Her body has been preparing for hours to give birth to your child. It takes time. You just have to be patient. It will be all over soon, and then you'll be holding your son or daughter in your arms. Just be patient. The door opened and the midwife stepped out. Harper, she's asking for you. Harper gave Jack an encouraging look before she joined her sister in the bedroom. For a moment, Harper couldn't help but appreciate Jack's fears. Grace was pale and sweat beaded her forehead from the pain. She smiled weakly at Harper and shook her head. I don't think I can do this. Harper didn't show her fear. It had indeed been hours. Instead, she summoned a bright smile. But you're doing so well, Harper encouraged her. For a moment, Harper met the midwife's gaze and could see she wanted to talk to Harper in private. I'll be back in a second. Harper joined the midwife in the corner of the small room. The baby is almost crowning, but she's too exhausted to push. Time is of the essence. Can you try and encourage her to draw on her last strength? Harper nodded firmly before she moved back to Grace's side. Come on, it's almost over. I need you to take a few deep breaths and gather all your strength. I'll tell her when it's time to push, the midwife said. I can't, Harper. I'm tired and I'm sore. Grace wept quietly. Harper shook her head and grabbed her sister's hand. You've been tired before, Grace, but you took care of me. You can do this. I know you can. I'm right here with you, just like always. We'll do it together. Now, the midwife said as another contraction sent waves of pain through Grace. Harper held her breath as her sister nearly crushed her hand. She could see Grace was giving it her all. A moment later, the midwife began to laugh. "You did it!" The cries of a baby filled the air as the midwife cleaned the little body off with a warm towel. She wrapped him in a blanket and brought him to Grace. "You have a beautiful little boy." Harper felt privileged to witness that moment. The baby looked up at Grace, and Grace smiled back. You could see the instant connection, the unwavering love, and the bond between mother and child. Harper had never yearned to have a child, but at that moment she found herself yearning to experience just such a wonderful moment. She pressed a kiss to her sister's forehead and quietly moved out of the room. "And," Jack cried out at the sight of her. Harper smiled, her heart filled with emotion. "You have a little boy? The midwife will be out to get you shortly." Jack's hurrahs could be heard throughout the apartment complex, his joy unrestricted as he hugged Harper. "I'm a father," Harper laughed. "That you are indeed." When the midwife called Jack to join his wife and his son, Harper had never felt more alone in her entire life. Until now, it had always been her and Grace. But now, Grace had family. A family that needed her more than Harper. If Harper had any doubts about moving to the West, she now knew the time had come. Now, all she needed was for William to finally propose. Chapter 6. 5th of November, 1882, 5 points, New York. When Harper opened the letter, she couldn't help but frown at the date. It was as if she had lost 2 months of her life. Ever since Jacob's birth, her usual routine of work and rest had been upended. The first month of Jacob's life he had spent crying at the drop of a hat. Although Jack had been promoted to shift manager at the docks, which made their financial position more stable, with Grace not working at all, money couldn't buy rest. Harper had gone to work during the day, and when she returned at night, she helped her sister with the fussy babe. The next month had gone better, with Grace getting Jacob into a routine of feeding and sleeping. But between all the chores and the laundry, Harper barely had a moment to appreciate her nephew. She was grateful that she had the opportunity to help her sister in her darkest hours as a new mother. But as she now watched Grace feeding Jacob from across the room, she knew Grace and Jacob had finally stepped into the light. Grace was glowing with the joy motherhood brought her, and Jacob simply doted over his mother. But having been so busy, Harper only now realized that she had never answered William's last letter that had arrived more than a month before. She felt a little anxious as she opened the envelope, wondering if he was ending their correspondence because of her indifference with responding. But instead, the contents of his letter surprised her. "Dear Harper, I long to hear from you, but expect you've been a little overwhelmed with the arrival of your nephew. Please congratulate your sister for me. When I didn't hear from you, I thought that perhaps you might have decided against corresponding with me, or perhaps you had become weary of writing letters after months on end, as have I. I believe that through our correspondence, we are both clear in our expectations for marriage. I cannot see why we should delay any further. I would like to ask for your hand in marriage and offer you a life of comfort on my ranch. I will honor and protect you for all the days of my life, and I can assure you that you will never want for anything. With this letter, I enclose enough money for your train fare, a month's wages to offer your sister as a gift from me, as well as money for any incidentals you might have on your journey west. I eagerly await your reply and to learn the date of your arrival. Best wishes, William Harper closed the letter and took a deep breath. The proposal wasn't unexpected, and yet it still caught her a little off guard. Was she truly ready to bid farewell to her life in New York and to marry a stranger? Peace settled over her shoulders like a warm blanket, as if the Lord was assuring her she was making the right decision. She wouldn't tell her sister just yet. She would secure her train ticket and then share the news with Grace and Jack over dinner. Later that evening, with little Jacob asleep in his crib, Grace, Jack, and Harper sat down at the table for dinner. After saying grace, Jack clapped his hands together with excitement in his eyes. "I have wonderful news," Jack announced. "After being promoted to shift manager at the docks last month, it seems management has taken an interest in me. They've made me the manager over the shift managers. It not only means a sturdy increase in wages, but it also that we get to move into one of the shipping company's houses reserved for management. Grace's jaw literally dropped. A brownstone? Harper asked eagerly. Yes, a row house closer to the harbor. After congratulations were given, Grace turned to Harper with an excited smile. Isn't it wonderful, Harper? We finally get to live in a house again, not a tenement apartment. Prosody, we should start sewing curtains and linens and... Actually, Harper began, taking a deep breath. Jack isn't the only one with news. I won't be moving with you to the row house, because when you move, I'll already be living in California. What? Jack asked, dumbfounded. After Grace filled Jack in on Harper's correspondence with William, she turned to Harper. I take it, he proposed. Are you sure you want to go ahead with this? Harper smiled at her sister. I'm sure. I'll be leaving in a few days. The train journey will take 3 days before I arrive in California, and after meeting William at the station, we'll be married. And what if he's nothing like he seems in his letters? Grace asked doubtfully. Harper shook her head. Then I'll figure it out. This is an adventure, Grace. Just like you have your adventure with Jack and Jacob, this is one I want to have. Can't you wait until after Christmas? It will be Jacob's first Christmas, Jack asked. Harper shook her head. It will be my first Christmas with my new husband. And there isn't anything we can say to convince you otherwise? Grace asked. No, I'm sure this is what I want to do. I'll write and send telegrams, and I promise that I will take good care of myself. I'm 20 years old, Grace. You can't take care of me forever. Besides, you have little Jack to care for now. Then I wish you the best of luck, sister. Perhaps one day we'll come and visit you in California. Grace smiled warmly at Harper. Harper nodded eagerly. I'd like that very much. Chapter 7. 10th of November, 1882, New York. Are you sure you have everything? Grace asked with a concerned look. Yes, I have everything. Now please, can you go home and get Jacob out of the cold? Harper insisted with a smile. I don't want you to go, Grace admitted tearfully. Jack wrapped an arm around Grace's shoulders. We want you to be happy. I'll pray you find just that in California. Thank you, Jack, Harper smiled gratefully. The last few days had flown by. Between preparing for her long train journey and packing everything she could into a carpet bag and a steam trunk, Harper had spent every free minute with Grace and Jacob. Last night she had had some doubts about leaving, but this morning when she opened her eyes, she hadn't been filled with dread or fear. Instead, she had been brimming with excitement. She was about to embark on her first journey that didn't include Grace. She was about to become a rancher's wife in a state so far away from New York that it would take 3 days by train to get there. She would see the country, different cities, mountain ranges, and perhaps even Native Americans if she was lucky. She couldn't wait for her adventure to begin, although saying goodbye was harder than she had thought it would be. I'll write, I promise. You'll get so tired of hearing from me. You'll wish you didn't teach me how to write. Grace sniffed and shook her head. I can't believe you're really going. Until now, I guess I believed you'd change your mind. My luggage has been loaded, Harper reminded her with a sad smile. Now you take care of my nephew and enjoy your new house. You deserve it, Grace. Every bit of it. Grace sniffed loudly with a nod. And Jack, you take care of my sister. I know you always have and always will. I'm counting on you to make sure she takes care of herself as well. Harper turned to Jack with a smile. Couldn't you at least wait until after Christmas, when it isn't so dreadfully cold? Grace asked, wiping her cheeks with a handkerchief. I have a blanket for the train. Besides, it isn't this cold in California. It doesn't even snow there over Christmas, Harper pointed out. Now go on, go home. I'll be just fine. After another tearful round of hugs, Jack finally managed to tear Grace away. Harper boarded the train and took a seat by the window. She watched her sister and Jack leave the platform and felt her heart squeeze with sadness. She would miss them terribly, but just as much as she needed to build a life on her own, they needed time alone as a family without her around. She let out a sigh and watched as other travelers boarded the train. Some traveled alone, others in groups of 2 or 3, And then there were the businessmen who had paid extra to sit in the private area right at the front of the train. Harper made a mental checklist of everything she needed to keep with her and checked her purse for all the items. Everything was there. "Excuse me, miss, but you're in the wrong car." An older man wearing a suit stopped beside Harper with a frown. "But I paid to be on the train?" Harper's eyes widened, fearing she'd been tossed off before her journey even began. "Miss, you paid the fare for the second-class car. That means you're up 2 cars. You'll like it up there, more space, and the windows are bigger too," the older man said with a kind smile. Harper retrieved her ticket from her pocket and was surprised to see that indeed she did have a second-class seat. She gathered her belongings and followed the conductor through 2 railways cars until she reached a car that seemed much more luxurious. She again took a seat by the window after stowing her things and glanced around the railway car. Instead of the foreign-speaking passengers in her previous car, this carriage seemed to be filled with persons from higher society. Feeling very pleased with her position on the train, Harper paid attention when the conductor began to speak. "Welcome on board the Transcontinental Railway Company's train. This train is westbound to San Francisco, although we will be stopping at numerous cities along the route, including Chicago. For those of you traveling further south than San Francisco, you will be changing trains there for the rest of your journey. The journey takes approximately 5 days, maybe more, maybe less, depending on the weather. Enjoy the trip." Harper smiled as excitement began to course through her veins when the train began to move. Slowly, it pulled away from the platform, the movement giving her a strange sensation, which she soon came to enjoy. All around her, passengers were pointing out landmarks to each other, but Harper didn't bother to look. Instead, her eyes were on the horizon in the distance, wondering what great wonders she was going to see on her journey. And when her journey ended, she would finally meet William. "Get back there! You didn't pay for this seat, you imbecile swine!" The conductor that had been so kind and friendly to Harper startled her with his gruff voice. She turned to see a man walk towards her, with her head hunched down. He was dirty, as if he hadn't had a bath in ages, and his hair was grimy and matted. Harper frowned, wondering who he was and what had happened to him that caused him to look so disheveled and tired with life. "My apologies, everyone. These people find their way onto the trains and think we won't notice. I'll make sure you won't be bothered again," the conductor apologized. "Then why do you let them board?" Harper asked out of innocent curiosity. The conductor shrugged. "We don't. They jump on once the doors are closed and find their way into the passenger cars. It's a shame, really, but a nuisance we can't seem to overcome." Harper nodded as he walked away. She could imagine the attraction of a free train journey for someone desperate enough to leave New York. She just wondered if they had bothered to pack food, since the train didn't offer an option of meals to second-class and third-class passengers. Pushing the dirty man and his fate from her mind, Harper's eyes widened as they began to leave the outskirts of New York, eager for her adventure to start. Chapter 8. 14th of November, 1882. Somewhere in Nevada. Harper's eyes fluttered open when she felt something brush against her leg. Thinking she had imagined it, she closed her eyes, hoping to fall asleep again. But she felt it again. She shifted in her seat in an attempt to see what it was when she saw a small hand rummaging through her carpet bag. She stood to her feet. Groggy from sleep and sore from sitting for the last 2 days, it took her a moment to register that someone was trying to steal from her. "Help!" Harper cried out, waking the passengers in her train car. It was just after dawn, the sun not even dancing on the horizon yet. "Help!" Harper saw the hand being snatched away and quickly looked up to see a young boy crawl out from under her seat before running towards the back of the railway car. The conductor moved so quickly that before the boy could reach the doors, he had grabbed him by the scruff of his neck. "What are you doing here?" "Thieving, no doubt." The conductor chastened him. All the passengers were avidly watching the spectacle unfold. Feeling that she had a vested interest in whatever the boy might have been stealing, Harper slid out of her seat and joined them at the back of the train car. He was rummaging through my carpet bag, Harper explained to the conductor. Is that so? And what did you steal, huh? If you're honest, I might consider not tossing you from this moving train. The conductor's voice held an edge of malice. I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't mean no harm. I was just looking for something to eat. I swear, I didn't take nothing. The boy began to explain with wide eyes. Have you checked your bag, miss? Is there anything of value missing? The conductor asked Harper. Harper shook her head. I'll see. She rushed back to her seat and went through her carpet bag, noticing that nothing was missing. She returned to the conductor. He didn't take anything. I said I didn't take nothing, the boy said stubbornly. Where are your parents? Harper asked before the conductor could continue to threaten the young boy. Don't have no parents. I take care of myself. He jutted out his chin as if it would make him look older. Harper frowned, recognizing that stubborn streak that had been hers at one time. You don't have parents, do you? How old are you? 9, he insisted. I'd say more like 7, the conductor argued. Yes, I think 7 seems more likely given his height, Harper agreed. How long have you been on the train? The boy glanced at the conductor before he turned his gaze towards the floor. Few months. A few months, the conductor cried out, horrified. Goodness, child, how have you survived? Why haven't we caught you before now? The boy shrugged, not looking sorry at all. I hide. I'm good at hiding. Well, not anymore you ain't, the conductor barked. He pulled a set of handcuffs from his pocket, surprising Harper and the other passengers as he secured one cuff around the boy's foot and the other cuff around the railing. Next stop, I'm handing you over to the sheriff. Your days of riding trains are over. Harper knew the conductor was doing the right thing, but she couldn't help but feel sorry for the little boy. His clothes were dirty and torn and very clearly much too large for him. His cheeks were hollow, revealing how poorly he had been eating. She kneeled beside the boy and asked him for his name. Henry, don't know the other one, the boy answered, referring to the last name. Harper nodded. And when was the last time you ate, Henry? Day before yesterday. Someone dropped an apple, Henry said with a guilty look, making it clear the apple hadn't been dropped but taken. Can I bring him something to eat? Harper asked the conductor. Your food, your choice, the conductor conceded gruffly. But why you would want to reward a thief is beyond me. Harper retrieved a couple of biscuits and some jerky from her carpet bag and gave them to the boy. Here you go. He ate with such ferocity that Harper's throat clogged with emotion. She knew what it was like not to have parents, but at least she'd always had Grace. Henry had no one. Harper returned to her seat, but her thoughts remained on the little boy, handcuffed at the back of the car. She understood that it was wrong of him to board a train without a ticket and to steal from the passengers, but he was only a little boy trying to survive. Of all she thought she'd encounter on her adventure to the west, Harper hadn't thought sympathizing with an orphan would be among them. Instead of finding herself captivated by the magnificent rock outcrops and orange sand of the desert, Harper barely even noticed. Instead, she found herself wondering what would become of the boy once he was handed over to the sheriff at their next stop. Chapter 9. Chapter 9. A few hours later, the conductor announced that they would be arriving in the next town shortly. As with every stop, you could hear the sighs of relief sound through the train. Some passengers made use of the stops to purchase fresh food and refreshments, whereas others simply used the time to stretch their limbs and get in some exercise. Harper usually did a bit of both while taking in each town and trying to commit it to memory. But instead of the excitement she usually felt when they were about to stop in a new town, Harper couldn't help but feel apprehensive for the little Henry's part. Her gaze darted towards him for about the millionth time before she searched for the conductor. She saw him sitting in a seat not far from where the boy was cuffed. "Excuse me," Harper said, sliding onto a seat beside the conductor. "I can't help but wonder what will happen to the boy when he's handed over to the sheriff. Will he be sent to an orphanage?" The conductor laughed and shook his head. "Ma'am, have you taken a look around? We're out in wild country, somewhere between a green cactus and red rock. There ain't no orphanages out here. and I can assure you no sheriff is going to pay for the boy's fare to go back east. My best guess is the sheriff will hand him off to someone willing to take him. Otherwise, let's just say he'll be lucky if someone decides to hire him as a stable hand. Horror gushed through Harper's mind. You mean he could? He very well could, ma'am. This is a hard country, each man looking out for himself. Let's just hope he's as clever at hiding when it's necessary. The conductor shrugged with a heavy sigh. But that's horrible. You can't just hand him over to the sheriff not knowing what his fate will be. He's only a child. The conductor cocked a brow with a curious expression. What do you suggest? I keep him on the train as a pet. Be realistic, ma'am. I am being realistic. He is only a little boy. Surely you can keep him on the train until you reach a town with an actual orphanage? Harper reasoned. That would be San Francisco. Who do you suppose would be looking after him until then? Feeding him, making sure he doesn't pick up on his thievery again. I've got a job to do, and I ain't losing my position because of some little thief. Besides, who even knows if the orphanage has room for another one? Harper understood the older man's position, but she couldn't fathom leaving a little boy over to his own fate. I can look after him. The words left her mouth before she had even thought them through. You? The conductor asked, as if she had suggested he be taken care of by a pack of wolves. Yes, I can take care of him and make sure he is taken to an orphanage in San Francisco. All you have to do is turn a blind eye until we reach the Pacific. Please, sir, I beg of you. Harper found herself pleading for a child she didn't know, a child that had tried to steal from her. She had never cared about anyone but Grace, but she found herself feeling protective of this little orphan boy, so much so that if forced, she would disembark with him in the next town. I'm not sure. The conductor hesitated. You won't even know he's here. The seat next to me is empty, so you won't even be inconveniencing anyone. Harper continued to give a reasonable argument. The train's whistle blew, announcing they were approaching the next town. Harper turned to the conductor with a pleading look. Please, I promise he won't be any trouble. The conductor paused for a long moment before he finally let out a heavy sigh. Fine, he can stay, but if comes down to it, you'll take responsibility for him not having a ticket. Do you hear? Harper nodded. I will, I promise. Do you want to take him now, or when we have stopped? The conductor asked. Afraid that the boy would run again, Harper shook her head. Let me just get some more food, then I'll take him off your hands when I return. An hour later, after Harper had stocked up on food and refreshments, she returned to the train. The little boy looked angry, as if he would bite anyone that dared to touch him. But Harper knew that anger was only to conceal his fear. He was terrified of what would become of him now that he had been caught. After stowing her purchases, Harper found the conductor. I'm ready. Together they moved toward the boy. Harper kneeled in front of him and searched his eyes. This kind man is going to take off those cuffs, but only if you promise to be good and come and sit with me. I bought you some food and even a candy bar, but you can only have it if you behave. Henry glanced at the conductor before he turned to Harper and nodded. I'll be good. No stealing, no running away, and you have to sit quietly, or else we'll get thrown off the train, Harper warned. Henry nodded again. The conductor shook his head with a heavy sigh before he unlocked Henry's handcuffs. Now he's your problem. Henry stood up and reached for Harper's hand. It felt strange to have a little hand in hers, but it made her want to protect him even more. Henry wasn't her problem. She realized as she led the boy back to her seat, it was her privilege to be able to help him. He ate everything Harper offered him and drank deeply from the canteen of water. When he was finally finished, he frowned up at Harper. What's your name? Harper smiled. I'm Harper Scott. It's a pleasure to meet you, Henry. Henry let out a big yawn that made Harper laugh. Why don't you try to get some sleep before you swallow me whole? Henry smiled at her shyly before he curled up in his seat. Without asking, he lay his head on Harper's lap and was soon fast asleep. Harper looked down at the sleeping child and felt something inside her moved, as if a door had been locked to certain yearnings and emotions, and Henry had somehow found the key. Without even realizing it, she began to stroke her fingers over his forehead in a way only a mother would. Chapter 10. Harper had fallen asleep along with Henry. When she woke up, it was late afternoon, and Henry was still fast asleep on her lap. Her heart swelled at the sight of him. She had feared that he would have woken up and run off again. Instead, he was still resting his head on her lap with her hand on his shoulder. Even through the baggy coat, Harper could feel he was just skin and bones. How long had it been since he had enjoyed a decent meal? There were so many questions that circled her mind about Henry and his situation, but the one that kept taking her breath was the thought of him going to an orphanage. Back in New York, she knew of a few orphanages. Harper knew only too well what it was like to live in one. After their parents passed away, Grace had thought it was best to turn themselves over to an orphanage. They had only stayed 2 weeks. 2 weeks had been enough time for Grace and Harper to realize that an orphanage was nothing but a jail for children. They were taught no lessons. They slept on moldy mattresses and worked from dawn till sundown. The headmistress despised children and would ban them from the dining hall at the drop of a hat. Harper could still remember the night Grace had woken her up to run away. They had lived on the streets for weeks before Grace had managed to find a job and lease them a room in a boarding house. Would that be Henry's fate? Her heart clenched at the thought. Henry stirred on her lap and his eyes fluttered open. For a moment, Harper could see he was confused before he sat up and that wary look returned to his eyes. "You're still here?" He asked the question as if he had expected her to be the one to run away. Harper smiled at him. "Of course I'm still here. Can I ask you a question?" Harper asked, wanting at least a few answers about Henry's past. Henry nodded, drowsily rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Where were you before you boarded the train?" Henry thought for a long moment before he answered. "Ma died of the flu last winter. They sent me to the place where the children live with the nuns. I didn't like it there. The nuns were mean and beat us when we didn't do our lessons right. I ran away." "When was this?" Harper asked, horrified to learn that he had been in an orphanage and had run away for the same reasons she and Grace had. "When it stopped being cold. I snatched food from shops until I heard some older kids saying that it was nicer on the train as long as you stayed hidden." "When did you get on the train?" Harper couldn't help but be surprised by the length of time Henry had endured without someone to look out for him, going back as long as the end of winter. "When it became cold. I usually stay in the back, but there wasn't any nice food there this time," Henry admitted. "I'm sorry for trying to steal from you." "That's all right," Harper said, draping an arm over Henry's shoulder. "Will I have to go back to the nuns now?" Henry asked, his wide eyes showing fear. Harper knew that she had to say yes. She knew that Henry couldn't stay on the train forever, and sooner or later trouble would find him on the streets, whether it be in San Francisco, New York, or a small town somewhere in between. "I'm going to live in California," Harper announced with a smile. "On a ranch." "Really?" Henry's eyes widened with fascination. "Yes. What if you didn't go back to New York or to live with the nuns? What if you stayed with me?" Harper couldn't believe she was considering taking in an orphan. She had never had the urge to become a mother, never even considered it, and now here she was taking in a child that wasn't even her own. "For always?" Henry asked, tilting his head curiously. Harper nodded. She had never felt in any way maternal, but she knew that Henry needed her. She might not be a good mother, but right now, she was all Henry had. She realized that if she went through with this, it might mean that William would turn her away, especially since he insisted he had no intention of having children. But Harper only had to look into Henry's eyes to know that she would protect him and care for him regardless of what it might cost her. Even if it cost her an intended marriage to William. "For always, Henry. You just have to promise me you're never going to run away ever again." Henry frowned for a moment. "And I don't have to hide?" "No, you don't have to hide or steal," Harper assured him. Henry's face blossomed into a wide grin. "I want to stay with you for always, Harper." Harper's heart swelled with joy, knowing that she would be there to take care of Henry. She wasn't sure what William's reaction might be, but she couldn't imagine he would force her to send Henry to an orphanage. And if he did, Harper would know that she couldn't marry someone without the capacity to be kind to a helpless child. Chapter 11. 16th of November, 1882, Alegria, California. It was late afternoon when the train finally stopped in the small town of Alegria. When they had stopped in San Francisco that morning, the conductor had been kind enough to help Harper secure a ticket for Henry for the rest of the journey. From San Francisco, they had continued south before they changed trains again for the last leg of their journey. Needless to say, both Harper and Henry were exhausted after a long day of traveling. The first thing that Harper noticed when they disembarked was the stifling heat. William had prepared her not to expect snow over Christmas, but he didn't warn her to prepare for the heat of a New York summer. Henry held her hand as if he would never let it go as they moved through the throng of people on the platform. Harper stopped and explained to him that she needed to get her steam trunk before they moved towards the luggage car. While they waited for her steam trunk, Harper couldn't help but feel anxious. William was expecting to meet her at the train station, after which they would go to the minister to be wed. He wasn't expecting a child. She couldn't help but be apprehensive about the possibilities over the next 30 minutes. If William turned her away, she wasn't sure what she would do. She had enough money to pay for room and board for the night, but what then? She couldn't afford a train fare back to New York, and even if she could, she wasn't sure that was where she would go. She glanced down at Henry, and her heart swelled in her chest. For him, she would find a way to care for both of them. "Here you go, ma'am." A kind gentleman pointed out Harper's steam trunk. "That's a big chest. Is everything in it yours?" Henry asked, wide-eyed. Harper smiled at him, realizing the little boy had nothing more to his name than the ill-fitting, dirty clothes he was wearing. "Yes, it's mine." She glanced around the small town and wondered about the possibility of an outfitter from which to buy Henry new clothes. Perhaps if he didn't look so abandoned and disheveled, William would be more willing to take him on. "Where are we going now?" Henry asked as the platform began to clear. Harper swallowed past the anxiety that had come to clog her throat. "We're waiting for a man by the name of William Dukestone. We will meet him and then see what happens next." She couldn't help but be grateful for a few moments to gather her thoughts and her wits while she waited for William. The small town of Alegria fascinated her as she took in what she could of it from the station platform. Over the last 3 days, she had traveled through numerous towns and seen a variety of different settlements, but Alegria seemed to have an appeal of its own. The Spanish influence was more than evident in the buildings, which reminded Harper that once upon a time, California had belonged to Mexico. There was a corral in the distance holding longhorn cattle, and even a small sheriff's office across the road. Instead of the muddy roads in New York, sand and dust lined the thoroughfare of Alegria. "Where are we?" Henry asked, scrunching up his nose with curiosity. "Alegria, or at least I think that's how you pronounce it." "That is how you pronounce it," an older man offered from a few feet away. "When this part of the country was still part of Mexico, the town got its name. In Spanish, it means joy." Harper smiled. She hoped to find joy here, and the town's name was promising just that. "It's a lovely name for a town," Harper smiled at the kind man. She noticed a wagon stop adjacent to the train platform with a single person on the driver's bench. She narrowed her eyes against the sun to try and make out his face, but it was shielded by a wide-brim hat. When he climbed down from the wagon, Harper noticed how tall he was, much taller than most men she had met in her life. He wore riding chaps and a flannel shirt, clearly more appropriately dressed for the warm weather than Harper, who was wearing a dress, a cardigan, and a winter coat. He glanced around the platform, and for the first time, Harper saw his eyes. They were blue, almost the color of the sky on a cool winter's morning. Although Harper had never met William Dukestone before, something inside her recognized him. He was about to turn and leave when Harper stepped forward. "William?" The man turned around with a deep frown as he met her gaze. "Harper?" Harper nodded nervously as she felt Henry's hand tighten in hers when William's gaze traveled from her to the child by her side. Knowing that William would feel betrayed, Harper kneeled in front of Henry. I quickly need to talk to William. Will you stay here and keep an eye on my steam trunk for me?" Henry nodded, although he looked slightly terrified. Harper quickly closed the distance between her and William. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, William." She summoned a smile and held out her hand in greeting. William looked at her hand as if it was a poisonous snake. "You said you didn't have no children." "I don't," Harper shrugged. "Look, before you ride off, as I can see you're about to, at least hear me out. I don't like liars, and I don't entertain cheats. Good luck with your journey home," William said in a deep voice that made the hairs on the back of Harper's neck rise. He began to walk away, and Harper glanced back at Henry, who looked rightly terrified. She knew that if she was going to find a way to make this work, she needed to do it now. Chapter 12. "Now just wait a minute," Harper called out as she ran after William. His legs were so long that one of his strides meant 3 of hers. "I've been traveling for days. The least you can do is take a few minutes to listen to what I have to say. Otherwise, you're not the man I thought you to be." William turned to her with a bored expression. "Fine, I'll hear you out, but just remember, I was firm about not wanting young uns right from the start." "I know, and he isn't mine. So will you give me a chance to explain?" Harper all but pleaded. When William didn't move, she began to tell him about how she found Henry rummaging through her purse. She explained to him that she had taken the child under her wing on the train, vowing to hand him over in San Francisco. "Then what is he still doing here?" William asked, confused. Harper let out a heavy sigh. "Have you ever been to an orphanage, William? Do you have any idea what it's like? It's worse than jail. It's child abuse, in my opinion. He told me yesterday that he was in an orphanage in New York after his parents died. He ran away because of the beatings and the punishments. I couldn't in good conscience deliver him to another orphanage, especially after knowing firsthand what it was like to live in one." "You were in an orphanage?" William asked with surprised sympathy. "Yes, for 2 weeks before my sister convinced me to run away. I am sure there are good orphanages out there, but I have yet to hear of one. He's only 7 years old, William. He can't fend for himself, and living as a stowaway on a train isn't living at all. It's surviving." Harper sighed heavily. "So you just took him on as if he were a stray mutt?" William asked, still confused. Harper frowned at him, narrowing her eyes. "What would you have thought of me if I told you I allowed the conductor to hand over a helpless child to a sheriff in some town in Nevada? You would have thought me heartless, right?" William was about to argue when he nodded. "I understand why you offered to take care of him, but surely you can't expect me just to accept him and raise him as my own son. Who says he won't pick up his thieving ways again?" "He won't," Harper said firmly. "He promised me that he was putting that behind him. Besides, it wasn't as if he was stealing money or jewelry, William. He was nicking food in order to survive. Look at him. Do you see how thin he is? I can't imagine he's had a good meal in months." William glanced at Henry and turned back to Harper. "So what do you expect me to do?" "Help me. Help me to help him. If I don't take him with me, the conductor has already arranged for the sheriff to pick him up and deliver him to the prison wagon to be taken to the nearest orphanage." "A prison wagon, William." Harper spoke in a fierce whisper. William took off his hat, revealing pitch-black hair. He dragged a hand through his hair and let out a heavy sigh. "I guess he can come to the ranch. He can bunk with the hands and work as a stable hand to earn his room and board." Harper was about to argue when she realized she should be grateful for William's offer. Henry wouldn't live with her in the main house, but at least he would have room and board. He would never go hungry again, and as for working as a stable hand, it would be an opportunity for Henry to learn about horses. He would be safe, most importantly. She finally nodded gratefully. "Thank you. I truly appreciate your kindness, and Henry will too." "Great. Can we get on with it now? The pastor's waiting," William said, glancing at his pocket watch. Harper nodded before she headed back to Henry. "Come on, we're going to the ranch. You're going to stay in a bunkhouse with the ranch hands, and you'll never have to worry about food again. All you have to do is help out around the stables." "Stables? Isn't that where they keep horses?" Henry asked, wide-eyed. "That's right," Harper smiled. "But I'm scared of horses," Henry said with a quivering voice. Harper wished there was time to explain to him how gentle horses were, but William was waiting on them. "You'll be just fine. Come on." William helped them into the wagon before he collected her steam trunk and lifted it onto the wagon as if it weighed no more than a wet cloth. Once they were all seated, Henry stuck out his hand between William and Harper. "Hello, mister. I'm Henry." William glanced at Harper before he turned to Henry. "It's a pleasure to meet you." He didn't shake the boy's hand or invite him to call him William. Instead, he just reached for the reins and commanded the horse to move. It wasn't the introduction Harper had hoped for, but she couldn't blame William. She had surprised him, arriving to meet him with a child at her side, whom he offered to house on the ranch. For now, that was more than she could have hoped for. She turned and gave Henry an encouraging smile before she turned her gaze back to the road. She wasn't sure where they were headed, but she knew that she was on her way to her own wedding. Unlike the day Grace had been married, there was no excitement, no special dress, and not even a bouquet of posies. But then, Harper reminded herself, this wasn't a real marriage. It was more an arrangement, one that would be mutually beneficial without any romance or feelings involved. But then why did her heart flutter whenever William's eyes met hers? Chapter 13. Harper felt no different as they drove back through town after meeting with the pastor. She had thought that once she was a married woman, she would feel differently, that she would somehow feel more mature. Instead, she felt overwhelmed. She glanced at William sitting beside her and felt a knot form in the pit of her stomach. She hardly knew this man, and now she was tied to him for the rest of her life. A wave of nausea overcame her, making her feel ill for a moment. "Are you all right? You're as pale as a ghost?" William looked at her with a concerned expression. "I'll be fine. Must be the heat," Harper lied. The pastor had conducted their wedding ceremony within minutes. They had barely been at the church as long as 20 minutes before they left as man and wife. Henry had obediently waited in the wagon the entire time. She breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, waiting for the nausea to pass. Henry was as quiet as a mouse in the back of the wagon. Trying to focus on anything but the man beside her, Harper began to inspect the stores and houses on the thoroughfare. There was a Christmas tree on the boardwalk, decorated with paper stars, and here and there she could spot signs of the upcoming season of festivity. Christmas was a little less than a month away, and Harper couldn't help but miss Grace terribly. It would be their first Christmas apart, and Harper wasn't even sure what Christmas would be like on the ranch. Although her Christmases with her sister had never been extravagant, they had always been together. She glanced over her shoulder at Henry, who seemed just as fascinated by his surroundings as she was. She vowed to see to it that he had a gift for Christmas. She would make one if she had to, but she would make sure that Henry's Christmas was special. Every child deserved to have a happy Christmas. As they drove out of town, the landscape began to change. Here and there were cacti or thorn bushes that seemed to thrive in the hot, dusty weather. The further they drove out of town, the more vegetation there was to be seen. Harper couldn't be sure of the direction they were headed, but it became more beautiful the further they rode. Finally, the wagon passed underneath a log that was positioned on two poles that read Dukestone Ranch, home. Her tummy did another strange tilt as she wondered if Dukestone Ranch would ever truly be her home. She could see longhorn cattle grazing in the distance as they neared a large house. For some reason, she had expected a cabin, not a house. This was a house that had been painted white in line with the Spanish influence she had seen in town. She could see it in the architecture of the house. It was magnificent. "Welcome to the ranch," William said with half a smile as they approached the house. "Over there, you'll see the stables, and just behind the stables is the bunkhouse. I have a couple living there to keep an eye on the Wilder ranch hands. Hank and Consuela have been with our family for years. They're as loyal and kind as they come. Hank is my main ranch hand," William explained. Harper nodded, taking it all in. She wouldn't say it out loud, but she couldn't help but wish that Henry could stay with her in the beautiful White House instead of out in the bunkhouse. When the wagon came to a stop, William climbed down before moving around the wagon to help Harper down. She appreciated the kind gesture once again when he reached for Henry and set him down on the ground with a "Welcome home." Henry's eyes widened with excitement, which made Harper's heart break that he wouldn't be staying with her. "Hank!" William called out to a man working a horse in the ring. The man climbed through the pole fence and walked towards them with a lazy gait. "This must be your missus, then?" "Hank Jackson. Meet Harper Scott, Harper Dukestone," William corrected himself. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Hank." Harper shook the man's hand and felt assured of his kindness by the look in his eyes. "This here is Henry. He'll be staying with you in the bunkhouse. He can help out as a stable hand," William explained briefly. Hank frowned at William after glancing at the little boy. "You want me to take him in?" "Yeah, he got no place else to go." "Will that be a problem?" William asked in a tone of voice that made it clear that Hank didn't really have a choice. "Course not," Hank huffed. "Come on, kid. Consuelo will know what to do with ya." Hank reached for Henry, who quickly darted to Harper's side. Harper felt tears well in her eyes, but she blinked them away as she kneeled in front of Henry. "You're going to be just fine. You see that bunkhouse over there? You'll be staying right there. And I'll be close. I'll be staying in this house over here. We'll still see each other every day. You go on now and be a good boy for Hank and Consuela." Henry's lip began to quiver as he nodded. Harper pulled him close and hugged him tightly. "Go on now. I'll see you soon." Henry sniffed as he allowed himself to be led away by Hank. Harper's heart all but broke, but at least she knew he wouldn't be in an orphanage. She had yet to meet Consuela, but she prayed to the heavens that Consuela would be kind to Henry. "Now that he's been dealt with, why don't I show you inside?" William offered, turning to her with a questioning look. Chapter 14. Harper smiled at her new husband, although her heart was tugging to follow Henry instead. Harper had never understood the need to have children felt by so many women, but she understood now what it meant to instinctively feel the need to protect and care for them. She followed William to the beautiful house that reminded her of a Spanish villa. Although winter, there was still greenery to be seen here and there. The house boasted a large porch with a trellis overhead. Although the trellis now supported nothing more than empty twines, Harper could imagine how beautiful it would look in the height of summer when it was covered with greenery. Before they reached the front door, it flew open, and a young, dark-haired woman came flying out. Harper felt her mouth curve, realizing the tornado of energy headed in her direction must be William's younger sister, Anne. Without warning, Anne flung her arms around Harper's neck and hugged her tightly. When she stood back, her smile was honest and endearing. "You must be Harper. I've been so excited for you to arrive. It's so nice to meet you. You're pretty." "William didn't say you were pretty," Anne said, shooting her brother a questioning look. For the first time, Harper saw William really smile. There was affection and love in his gaze as he looked at Anne. "Harper, this is my sister Anne, just in case you were wondering why this strange woman attacked you with a hug." "It's nice to meet you too, Anne," Harper laughed. "We're like sisters now that you're married to my brother. I've always wanted a sister. We can share dresses and do each other's hair, and we can even share our secrets," Anne babbled excitedly. It was easy to tell by her lack of reserve that she had been raised by a very protective brother. She had yet to learn that not all people were honest and trustworthy, but her naivety charmed Harper. "Before you completely frighten her away, could you first show her to her room? That way she at least has somewhere to escape to from all the plans you have for her," William asked with a small chuckle. "Of course, come, I'll show you." Anne hooked her hand through Harper's elbow and led her into the house. "This is the living room, or sitting room. I'm not sure what they call it back east. But we almost live in this room, so we call it the living room," Anne explained with a laugh. "There is the kitchen. We've got a wood stove, top of the line, I'm told. William had it installed especially for you." Anne was talking a mile a minute, barely giving Harper time to take anything in. She did, however, notice how neat the house was and the high quality of the furniture. Nothing like the rickety chairs and off-balance table they had in their tenement apartment in 5 Points. Through here, you have the wash-up area, and where we keep the brooms and all the non-spoilable food items. And then through that door, you reach the garden, Anne explained. Before Harper could open the door to see the garden, Anne was already tugging her in a different direction. My rooms are just off the living room through that door, with my own private door to the garden. Then upstairs, Anne said, all but dragging Harper up the stairs, are the other bedrooms. Harper didn't hear a word Anne said as they ascended the stairs. Instead, she found herself looking at the sepia photographs hanging on the wall. Her curiosity was piqued, wondering who all those people were. Oh, don't worry about them. Mother liked photographs. She would hang a photograph if she found one, regardless of whether she knew the people or not. That's her. Anne pointed to a woman that looked like an older version of herself in a photograph. Hiv. She was beautiful, Harper said, looking at the picture. Yes, she was. Anne waited for her on the landing, clearly eager to give her the rest of the tour. Oh, I forgot to show you. We have a separate room for bathing downstairs. It just makes it easier for the bathwater to be tossed out. We use it to water the garden. That's clever. Harper nodded, remembering how hard it was to run a bath and dispose of the water in their apartment. For that reason, they had wash basins and hardly ever filled the tub for a good soak. This here is a guest room. Then over there you have William's room, and here, Anne opened a door and showed Harper inside, is your room. Harper gasped as she stood at the entrance of her room. It was larger than their entire tenement apartment in 5 Points. There was a beautiful 4-poster bed in the center of the room, with a large closet to one side and a bureau against the other wall. There was a mirror that was as tall as Harper, and large windows letting light flow into the room. This is my room, Anne sighed. I know, we should have replaced the drapes years ago, but you know how men are, they hardly consider such things. But the good news is, Anne moved towards the drapes and pulled them all the way back, revealing a door. You have a small balcony. She opened the doors and revealed a small balcony holding a single chair. The balcony had wrought iron railing that Harper moved towards. She let her hands slide over the railing as she smiled, realizing she could see the bunkhouse from her balcony. This is amazing, Anne. I know. It used to be my room when I was younger, but I prefer my quarters downstairs. Now I can take a stroll in the garden whenever I want, especially during summer when the nights are so hot you can't fall asleep. Harper took a moment to take it all in. The house, her room, Anne. It was all even better than Harper could have imagined. It was as if she had stepped into a dream and was just waiting to wake up. I'll have your trunk brought up. I'm sure you'd like to take a long soak and rest a while before dinner? Anne asked. Harper nodded gratefully. Thank you, Anne. That would be lovely. Chapter 15. Harper enjoyed a long soak in the large tub. It was a luxury unlike anything she had ever known before. Anne had even been kind enough to add scented lavender leaves to the water, making her feel like a queen when she finally emerged. She was amazed that they had things like this out west. Not sure how formal dinner would be, Harper chose a dress that she believed flattered her, whilst not overly formal. She wanted to make a good impression on William tonight, especially after the disaster of their first meeting. She braided her wet hair to one side and wore the necklace Grace had given her the Christmas before. As she stood in front of the full-length mirror, she reached for the necklace and missed Grace and Jack. Harper drew in a deep, fortifying breath before she headed downstairs to join Anne and William for dinner. Here she comes. Anne called out from the base of the stairs as Harper appeared on the landing. We were just wondering if you maybe fell asleep, Anne informed her as they walked to the dining room together. To be honest, I didn't even try to rest. I was afraid if I fell asleep I wouldn't wake up until morning. I sat on the balcony and enjoyed the fresh air instead, Harper explained. I can imagine sitting on a train for 3 days must be terrible with all those people breathing the same air. Anne made a face that reflected Harper's thoughts. They reached the dining room, and Harper frowned at the feast that was laid out on the table. Through William's letters, she had expected she would be doing the cooking. So who had cooked this feast? Consuela cooked, Anne said, as if reading her mind. It looks wonderful. Harper glanced at William and found him looking at her. Evening, William. Good evening, Harper. William cleared his throat and quickly moved around the table to pull out her chair. Harper took a seat and realized how hungry she was by the sight of all the food. Let's say grace. William bowed his head, and Anne and Harper did the same. Lord, bless the hands that prepared the food, and may it nourish our bodies to enable us to do your good work. Amen. Harper felt the corners of her mouth curve, pleased to know that her new husband was a religious man. Through most of dinner, Anne babbled consistently. She told Harper everything she could think to tell about the house, the ranch, and their family's history on it. By the time Harper had finished eating, she felt thoroughly informed. Anne, I'm sure Harper is tired. Why not leave the rest of your tales until morning? William suggested. Anne's eyes widened. Oh, of course, you want to be alone. Excuse me, I'm going to turn in for the night. With that, Anne disappeared from the dining room. William chuckled and shook his head. That wasn't what I meant, but she was out of here before I could explain. She seems like a wonderful girl. Harper smiled at her new husband, fearing the idea of being alone with him. Until now, they had either been accompanied by Anne or Henry. She is a little overeager and overexcited at times, but I'd rather have that than how she was after my ma passed away. She barely spoke for a year, William informed her. That was 6 years ago, right? Harper tried to recall Anne's words when she had looked at the photographs on the stairs. Yes, it was very hard for Anne. She was only 10 at the time. Luckily, she had you. Harper smiled at William and his eyes met hers. This time he didn't quickly look away or speak to avoid the intimacy. Harper couldn't help but admit that her husband was quite attractive. Now that she had a chance to look at him for the first time, she felt a flicker of attraction swirl in the air. I thought it would be good for her to have a female role model. I hope you don't mind, William said with half a smile. Harper laughed softly. I'm not sure what good I'll do as a role model, but I'd be delighted to be her friend. William's eyes narrowed, and a small smile curved his mouth as he held her gaze. Anne was right. You didn't mention how pretty you were. Harper's heart skipped a beat. The last thing she had expected of William tonight was a compliment. Grace is prettier. The words slipped from her mouth before she could stop them. William's smile was charming. But I'm not married to Grace, am I? Her eyes widened, realizing he was right. For a moment she had forgotten that this wasn't just some kind man who had invited her to dinner. This was her husband. You have a beautiful home, William. William nodded agreeably. It is, but it's not just my home, Harper. It's our home now. You're my wife. What is mine is yours. Harper's breath caught. The moment was so intense, her heart seemed to stop beating. The flicker of attraction was back, but this time it was as bright as the beams of the morning sun, warming her from the inside out. William's eyes became slightly clouded as he held her gaze. Harper knew that they had both agreed that there wouldn't be romance, but in that moment she couldn't help but hope for William's affection. Suddenly, without warning, William stood up and cleared his throat. It's late. I'm sure you'd like to turn in. I'll ask Consuela to deal with the dishes in the morning so that you can sleep in. Good night, Harper. Harper watched William walk out of the dining room, confused and baffled by what had just transpired between them. Chapter 16, 22nd of December, 1882, Dukestone Ranch. As she did every morning, Harper climbed out of bed and moved towards the balcony. Although the nights had grown cooler, Harper still slept with the balcony door open every night, enjoying the fresh breeze that blew into her room. She drew in a deep breath and looked out over the ranch. It had been a little more than a month since her arrival on Dukestone Ranch, and during that time she learned a few things about ranching. Firstly, she had learned that William and his ranch hands were up before dawn. Sometimes they would ride out to check on the cattle. Other times they would move a herd or bring it back to the corral beside the stables. Secondly, she had packed away her winter coat for good. They were in the height of winter, and Harper had yet to need it. The weather was a happy relief from the freezing cold winters she had endured her entire life up north. Thirdly, she had yet to find a way to connect with her husband. On their first night, Harper had been certain they had shared a connection of some sort, but ever since then he had become cool and withdrawn. He rarely sought her out, although his letters had explicitly mentioned that he sought companionship. And when he did, Harper would be the one doing the talking while he simply walked alongside her. Harper still didn't know anything more about William Dukestone than on the day of her arrival. The only thing she did learn about him was that his ranch hands respected him and that his sister adored him. It had taken Harper a week to find a routine in her new home and surroundings. Once she had settled into a routine, she not only felt more at home, but more useful as well. She would start her mornings by making breakfast before she would deal with the dishes. After breakfast, she would do some cleaning around the house. Some days it would only entail sweeping and some light dusting. Other days she would scrub floors and wash the windows. After lunch, which she made, she would find her way to the stables to spend some time with Henry. William hadn't asked her not to, and Harper hadn't asked his permission, but visiting Henry had become the highlight of her day. He would tell her about what he had for dinner the night before, and they would talk about the horses a little before Harper would give him his lessons. She made a point of not making it seem like work. She taught him to count by the numbers on the stalls. She taught him to write his name by drawing it for him in the sand. Without realizing it, Henry had become the most important person in her life. She felt directly responsible for his happiness, although William still hardly acknowledged his presence. Harper was grateful that Consuela had taken him under her wing, but Henry still asked Harper every day when they could live together. It broke Harper's heart. After spending a few minutes on the balcony, Harper headed downstairs to begin her day. She had started to include Anne to help with the chores around the house, feeling that as a woman it was imperative that Anne knew how to cook, clean, and do laundry. After doing laundry and hanging it out to dry, Harper returned to the kitchen to start making lunch. Anne was headed into Alegria today to visit with her friend, which meant Harper and William would be dining alone this evening. Harper couldn't help but feel slightly terrified at the idea. When she approached the stables after lunch, Henry ran to her with a beaming grin. Consuela had managed to find clothes for him through a few friends in town, which meant his clothes now fit him perfectly. "Harper, you came!" Henry's excitement to see her never waned. "Of course I came. What have you been up to? Have you been minding Hank and Consuela?" Harper asked with a cocked brow. "Yes, ma'am. Consuela says I make my bed better than the other ranch hands," Henry announced proudly. "That's good news. So what are we going to do today?" Harper asked Henry, giving him a choice of what he wanted to learn. "Christmas. Tell me about Christmas. It's only 3 days away, right? Will Santa Claus bring me a gift?" Henry asked eagerly. Harper smiled as she sat down on a hay bale, gesturing for Henry to join her. "Before we talk about gifts, why don't we talk about how Christmas began?" "So he had to sleep in a manger?" Henry asked when Harper had finished telling him about the birth of Jesus. "That's right, and then 3 wise men brought him gifts, knowing he was going to be our savior." "No one brought me gifts," Henry pouted. "But one day they will, because you two are special, Henry. Always remember that," Harper promised, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "No, I'm not. I'm just me, Henry. And if you don't clean the water troughs, you'll be just Henry without a place to stay." William's gruff voice suddenly spoke behind Harper. Harper turned around and shot William a hard look. "He'll do the water troughs later. I was just teaching him about the importance of Christmas." "Well, don't take too long," William snapped before he walked away. Harper drew in a deep breath to steady her anger. The longer she was on the ranch, the more she wondered why William had wanted a companion in the first place, since most of the time, like now, it felt as if she was nothing more to him than a nuisance. She smiled warmly at Henry and gave him a tight hug. "We'll talk more tomorrow, I promise." As she walked away from the stables, Harper couldn't help but fear that this would be the nature of her future. William barking orders and her simply obeying. That wasn't a partnership. That was just another person like Ivar shouting demands at her all day. Was that really what she wanted for the rest of her life? Her heart ached knowing that wasn't what she wanted, but she did want William. She hadn't expected to have feelings for her new husband, other than perhaps friendly affection. Instead, she had gone and fallen in love with a man who treated her like a ranch hand or barely acknowledged her presence at all. Chapter 17. 23rd of December 1882, Dukestone Ranch. Harper had spent a restless night tossing and turn in her bed. The acknowledgement of the feelings she had for William terrified her. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life loving someone who didn't seem to care for her in the least. Tomorrow would be Christmas Eve, and the realization that she wouldn't spend it with Grace and Jack made her heart feel even heavier. Anne had warned her that they would need to start preparing for Christmas Day this morning. At first, Harper had been baffled as to why she should cook 2 days ahead of time. But when she learned about the Christmas celebration that William held for the ranch hands and their families, she could understand the reasons. They would have close to 50 guests, and to cater for everyone would take more than a morning to prepare. Anne had arranged for everything they needed to be delivered to the ranch this morning. But before the delivery arrived, Harper wanted to spend some time with Henry. She could only imagine that just like she missed her family in New York, Henry must be missing his parents and thinking of the Christmases they had shared. After Harper had breakfast and cleaned the kitchen, she took a moment to herself on the porch. She didn't want Henry to see that she was sad or worried. She wanted him to find comfort in knowing that she was happy to be on the ranch. "You seem awfully quiet this morning," Anne commented as she joined Harper on the porch. Harper shrugged. "Just had a restless night, that's all." "And what might have caused that restless night?" Anne asked, concerned. When Harper didn't answer, Anne searched her face intently. "You know you can confide in me, Harper. If something is troubling you, I'd like to help however I can." Harper smiled at Anne, although the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I appreciate it, Anne. I really do. But there's really nothing you can do about what is troubling me." "I can try," Anne offered. "No, let's leave it at that." Harper stood up and summoned a smile. "I'm going to visit Henry at the stables. Would you like to join me?" Anne smiled brightly. "I'd like that very much." As they crossed the yard, Harper caught sight of William working with a horse in the ring. Usually, he was out riding the herd or checking fences, but today it seemed he had sent the ranch hands to do that instead. "He really likes you," Anne gushed beside her. Harper's jaw almost dropped, but she quickly corrected herself, knowing it would be wrong to confide in Anne with regards to her doubts about William. She saw Henry standing by the entrance of the stables and her heart lifted. Deciding to pretend that she misunderstood, she spoke from the heart when she answered. "I really like Henry too. I still can't believe you just decided to make him your responsibility. It speaks of your kind nature," Anne complimented her. Harper shook her head. "No, it speaks of Henry's irresistible charm. Hello, Henry." As always, Henry raced towards her before hugging her as tightly as he possibly could. Harper was about to step back and meet his gaze when she felt his shoulders quivering against her. "Henry?" Henry sniffed loudly and stepped back. "I'm sorry, Harper." "What's the matter?" Harper asked, kneeling in front of him. "Are you hurt?" "No," Henry shook his head. "But the big one almost kicked me when I tried to clean his stall. They don't like me, Harper. I'm a terrible stable boy. And if William learns that, he's going to take me to the sheriff. I just know it. Then we won't be together for always." Harper's heart clenched in her chest. Henry had told her from the start that he was afraid of the horses, but she had done everything in her power to convince him that he had no reason to be. But since she didn't really know horses that well, she wasn't brave enough to approach one to demonstrate to Henry that they were gentle. "It's all right. Come on, it's all right. You just got a big fright, that's all," Harper assured him. "And Consuela doesn't want me either. She told Hank that I'm not her problem. She thinks I didn't hear, but I did. No one loves me. I don't belong anywhere." Henry's sobs grew louder. Harper picked him up and held him close, The words she wanted to speak were the only words she couldn't. You belong with me. Things were tense enough between her and William already, without her adding to it. She held Henry until he stopped crying before she set him down. Sometimes when I have a bad day, I think of the best I have in my life at that very moment. What's the best you have in your life? Henry sniffed before answered. You. Harper hugged him tightly and smiled at him with warmth and love in her gaze. And you're mine. Just remember those horses are more frightened of you than you are of them. Talk to them, sing to them, and I'm sure they'll love you just as I do. Henry frowned for a moment, doubting Harper was making any sense. I do. Anne spoke up for the first time. I always sing to my horse. It makes her calm. See, you can do it, Harper encouraged him. Henry hesitated for a moment before he nodded. I'm going to go sing them right now. He disappeared into the stables, leaving Harper and Anne staring after him. That boy dotes on you, Harper. You realize that? Anne said, turning to Harper. Harper nodded. And I dote on him. I'm sure William would have let him stay with you if it hadn't been for... Anne's sentence was cut off by William's voice. Harper? Chapter 18. Chapter 18. Harper turned to see William walking towards them. He glanced briefly at Anne before meeting her gaze again. Care to go for a walk? This was the first time William had initiated one of their walks. Usually, Harper suggested they go for a walk, and then proceeded to be the one doing all the talking. She was pleasantly surprised to have him suggest the walk this time. I'd like that. Anne, you'll wait for me before you start with the preparations? Anne nodded. Go on, I'll hold down the fort. Harper walked beside William towards the fields. She wouldn't admit it, but she wasn't brave enough to venture into the fields without William by her side. She had heard enough tales about snakes on the property and didn't care to find one, regardless of whether it was winter or not. When they reached a clearing with a view over the valley in the distance, William stopped and turned to her with a frown. I know you're trying to be kind to the boy, but you're coddling him. It's a hard life, and he's not going to learn how to be resilient if you're there to wipe away his tears every time. Harper felt anger course through her veins as she met William's gaze. Is that why you asked me to come for a walk? So you could chasten me about loving an orphan? About trying to give him a little confidence and a little attention? Why else would I have asked you on a walk? William asked, baffled. Harper let out a wry laugh. I don't know, William. Perhaps so we could finally become the friends you said we would be after we got married? Since my coming here, you've either ignored me, avoided me, or commanded me, and when it comes to Henry, you will not tell me what to do or what not to do. I am very grateful that you allowed him to stay on the ranch, but have you even considered actually talking to him? Why would I talk to a stable hand? William scoffed. Because he is only a child that you made a stable hand without teaching him anything about horses. He's scared to death of them. Every time he walks into those stables, he's terrified, and yet he does what is expected of him because he fears being sent away. There's nothing to be afraid of. The horses won't bother him unless he bothers them. William shrugged, as if it was common knowledge. You might know that, William, but Henry doesn't. To him, they are giant animals with large feet and the ability to crush him at any moment, Harper pointed out. William let out a sigh. Is that all? I've got to get back. Harper found herself detesting him. He hadn't been this closed off or rude when they had exchanged letters. Harper had come to California accepting that he might never love her, but she hadn't expected him to be downright hostile towards her. Regardless of whether he was reacting to her arriving with Henry, she still couldn't fathom why. Henry had done nothing but keep to himself and do what was expected him. Harper searched William's gaze and sighed with disappointment. Go on, I'm becoming rather fond of my own company. She knew she was being snappy, but she couldn't help it. She was tired of pretending that she was happy. She was grateful. There was a big difference between the two. She watched William walk away and wondered why he had advertised for a wife in the first place, when he didn't want the companionship. Perhaps he should have advertised for a housekeeper instead. At least a housekeeper would earn wages and feel worthy. Harper stayed there for a while longer, trying to think of a way to either get through to William or leave the ranch. Only it wasn't that easy. She had no money, and she had nowhere to go. Plus, there was her new status. She wasn't free anymore. But if she did leave, she would be taking Henry with her. Finally, she started back towards the homestead, knowing that leaving wasn't an option. Henry had spent enough time without a home or knowing where his next meal would come from. For Henry's sake, she would simply need to make things work. She prayed all the way back, hoping that God would bless her with a miracle, or at least a solution to her problems. Chapter 19. 24th of December 1882, Dukestone Ranch. On the morning of Christmas Eve, Harper returned to the house, feeling even more emotional than the day before. She had spent the last hour trying to console Henry after he fell into a water bucket when a horse startled him. Yesterday, she had thought that she was doing the right thing by staying for both her and Henry's sakes. But now she was having firm doubts about staying. William might have been kind enough to allow Henry to stay, but to force him to work with the horses after what she told him, she was beginning to doubt her husband's character and her own for not standing up to him. Feeling down and miserable, she joined Anne in the kitchen to continue with the preparations for the Christmas Day celebration. Anne had spent the night before decorating the entire house to make it feel festive. Harper appreciated her trouble because the decorations were the most beautiful she had ever seen, but not even surrounded by reminders of Christmas could Harper seem to get into the Christmas spirit. She worked in silence, making salads from recipes that had belonged to William's mother. She was afraid that if she engaged in a conversation with Anne, she would reveal her true feelings. Instead, she focused on the task at hand whilst trying to think of a way for her and Henry to leave the ranch and start a new life elsewhere. Henry seemed upset, Anne finally asked, after about 2 hours of working in silence. Harper nodded. He was, very upset. You seem to care for him a lot. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought he was your son, Anne commented without realizing how much her words hurt. If it was up to me, I would have raised him as such. But it's been made very clear that he isn't allowed inside the house. Harper said the words through clenched teeth. She was tired of pretending, tired of acting happy simply because it was Christmas. In her opinion, Christmas time had never been more horrible in her entire life. Not even the year when she and Grace had snuck into the back of a wagon to sleep because they didn't have a home. At least they had each other. William, he can be harsh at times. I think the desert sun has toughened him too much, Anne said quietly, trying to defend her brother. But you can't really blame him. Blame him? Harper snapped, turning to Anne. Anne might be the sweetest thing since honey, but it was time she learned the truth about her brother. Of course I blame him. Henry is terrified of horses, and William insists the poor boy should toughen up. It won't take anything from him to allow me to raise Henry, not a single dime or an ounce of his energy, and yet he acts as if the child has leprosy. Anne searched Harper's gaze with a deep frown. You don't know, do you? Know what? Harper asked irritably. No one could defend William's actions in her mind. This is all my fault. I should have never placed that advertisement. Anne sniffed quietly and shook her head. I'm so sorry, Harper. I thought once you arrived, he'd open up to you and he'd finally be happy again. I didn't think he'd be. Harper frowned with confusion etched in her expression. Anne, what are you talking about? Did you place the advertisement? Anne nodded. I had to do something. It's been 6 years and he hasn't moved on. He barely smiles or laughs. It's like he died the day they did. Anne, I have no idea what you're talking about. Harper cried out, trying to get through to the young girl. Anne blinked twice before she nodded and drew in a deep breath. William was married before. Her name was Ilana, and they were very much in love. They were married for 3 years before they were blessed with their beautiful baby boy. Ilana and Michael were his whole world. William was really and truly happy. Harper reached for a chair and sank into it as waves of shock flowed over her. He had a family? Yes. We all loved Ilana, and as for Michael, he was the most adorable baby, with chubby cheeks and a gummy smile. Anne wiped away a tear. Ilana loved riding. She could ride with the best of them and always helped herd the cattle or drive them to auction. But after Michael was born, she spent more time at home. Then one winter, 6 years ago, William and the men had to drive cattle east. Alana insisted that she wanted to spend the time in the cabin by the creek. My grandparents had lived there before they passed away. You see, at the time we used it as a place to break away from the ranch and all the responsibilities. So before William and the men left, he made sure that Alana and the baby were settled into the cabin. We had just lost our mother and was visiting an aunt in San Francisco that year. Anne sighed heavily and shook her head. "Please, Anne, go on," Harper encouraged her. Anne nodded before she continued. "No one knows how the fire started or when it started, but when William returned from delivering the cattle, there was nothing left of the cabin or his family." Harper gasped with horror. "No, poor William. He hasn't been the same since." Anne shrugged with a sad expression. "I thought that if I could convince him to bring a companion to the ranch, that perhaps he might open his heart to love again, that he might be happy again, but it seems I was wrong." Harper frowned as she calculated the time since Alana and Michael had passed. "That means that Henry is about the same age Michael would have been?" Anne nodded. "So it's not that William is mean. Henry just reminds him of what he lost. And I think having you here reminds him of that as well. I'm sorry, Harper. Like I said, it was my idea to place the advertisement." "Never mind that," Harper shook her head. "He made the decision to write to me and to ask for my hand in marriage. You can't take responsibility for his behavior entirely. Although learning this makes me understand why he has been so distant with me. I think William believes that if he loves again, he would be betraying Alana," Anne pointed out. Harper nodded. "You just might be right. Just don't give up on him, Harper. I know you can make him happy. He just needs to accept that Alana and Michael are gone." "What about Michael and Alana?" William barked, catching them red-handed in their gossip. Anne's eyes widened. "I forgot I need to make sure we have enough tables." Anne rushed out of the kitchen so fast that Harper almost thought she had the devil on her heels. Harper turned to William with a kind look. "She didn't mean anything. She was just telling me about your wife and your son." Harper stood up and moved towards William. She reached for his hands as she met his gaze. "I'm terribly sorry for your loss, William." Harper turned to see William walking towards them. He glanced briefly at Anne before meeting her gaze again. "Care to go for a walk?" This was the first time William had initiated one of their walks. Usually, Harper suggested they go for a walk and then proceeded to be the one doing all the talking. She was pleasantly surprised to have him suggest the walk this time. "I'd like that. Anne, you'll wait for me before you start with the preparations?" Anne nodded. "Go on. I'll hold down the fort." Harper walked beside William towards the fields. She wouldn't admit it, but she wasn't brave enough to venture into the fields without William by her side. Prosody rate to Pwink. She had heard enough tales about snakes on the property and didn't care to find one, regardless of whether it was winter or not. When they reached a clearing with a view over the valley in the distance, William stopped and turned to her with a frown. "I know you're trying to be kind to the boy, but you're coddling him. It's a hard life, and he's not going to learn how to be resilient if you're there to wipe away his tears every time." Harper felt anger course through her veins as she met William's gaze. "Is that why you asked me to come for a walk? So you could chasten me about loving an orphan? About trying to give him a little confidence and a little attention?" "Why else would I have asked you on a walk?" William asked, baffled. Harper let out a wry laugh. "I don't know, William. Perhaps so we could finally become the friends you said we would be after we got married? Since my coming here, you've either ignored me, avoided me, or commanded me. And when it comes to Henry, you will not tell me what to do or what not to do. I am very grateful that you allowed him to stay on the ranch, but have you even considered actually talking to him?" "Why would I talk to a stable hand?" William scoffed. "Because he is only a child. A child that you made a stable hand without teaching him anything about horses. He's scared to death of them. Every time he walks into those stables, he's terrified, and yet he does what is expected of him because he fears being sent away. There's nothing to be afraid of. The horses won't bother him unless he bothers them." William shrugged as if it was common knowledge. You might know that, William, but Henry doesn't. To him, they are giant animals with large feet and the ability to crush him at any moment, Harper pointed out. William let out a sigh. Is that all? I've got to get back. Harper found herself detesting him. He hadn't been this closed off or rude when they had exchanged letters. Harper had come to California accepting that he might never love her, but she hadn't expected him to be downright hostile towards her. Regardless of whether he was reacting to her arriving with Henry, she still couldn't fathom why. Henry had done nothing but keep to himself and do what was expected him. Harper searched William's gaze and sighed with disappointment. Go on, I'm becoming rather fond of my own company. She knew she was being snappy, but she couldn't help it. She was tired of pretending that she was happy. She was grateful. There was a big difference between the two. She watched William walk away and wondered why he had advertised for a wife in the first place when he didn't want the companionship. Perhaps he should have advertised for a housekeeper instead. At least a housekeeper would earn wages and feel worthy. Harper stayed there for a while longer, trying to think of a way to either get through to William or leave the ranch. Only it wasn't that easy. She had no money and she had nowhere to go. Plus, there was her new status. She wasn't free anymore, but if she did leave, she would be taking Henry with her. Finally, she started back towards the homestead, knowing that leaving wasn't an option. Henry had spent enough time without a home or knowing where his next meal would come from. For Henry's sake, she would simply need to make things work. She prayed all the way back, hoping that God would bless her with a miracle or at least a solution to her problems. Chapter 20. The emotion that welled in William's eyes made Harper's heart clench in her chest. She had lost her parents and knew what such a loss felt like, but to lose a wife and a son, it was unimaginable. She couldn't help but sympathize with him. To deal with such a loss would change anyone. William clenched his jaw and squeezed the bridge of his nose. When he opened his eyes, it was as if she finally saw beyond the cool facade. It was wrong of me not to tell you. I can understand how hard it must be to talk about them, Harper sympathized. But that isn't a reason to treat you the way I have. I apologize for my behavior. It was wrong. I'll take care to consider your feelings in future. William's voice was soft, almost as if it was hard for him to speak. Harper shook her head. I don't want to take Alana's place, William. I just want to know that I belong here, that I'm welcome here. It feels as if you regret asking me to come to California? She hadn't planned on laying her heart on the table, but now that the moment had arisen, Harper decided that honesty would be a good place to start. I'm sorry if you feel that way. I don't regret asking you to come. Instead, it's hard for me to have someone else in the house I shared with Alana, with our son. That isn't your fault, and it shouldn't affect you. But it is affecting me, Harper admitted quietly. That isn't my intention. After I lost them, I just got set in my ways. I had no one to consider, no one to think of, only myself and the ranch. Of course, I looked out for Anne, but she's never been any trouble. When she told me she'd placed the advertisement, I was furious to say the least. I didn't want another wife. I didn't want to lose someone else I love. Harper nodded. I can understand that, but then why did you respond to my letter? William shrugged. I'm not sure. I think it was your honesty. Your willingness to accept me as I am, without any romantic notions or the prospect of having children in the future. When you wrote back, I found myself enjoying our interactions. It gave me something to look forward to again. Then, when you arrived, I had Henry with me, Harper finished for him. Yes, you had the boy, William said gruffly. Having been a father, I'm sure you understand that I couldn't have allowed the conductor to hand him over to the sheriff. I know that, but seeing him, it reminds me of my Michael. It reminds me of how old he would have been, of all the things I wanted to teach him. I wanted to teach him about horses and riding and breeding cattle. I wanted to take him on cattle drives and teach him to hunt, and then he was gone before his first birthday. William's voice clogged with emotion. Harper stepped forward and touched his arm. Fate has a way of dealing us a foul hand. It did for me and my sister and for you, but it also has a way of slipping in an ace when you least expect it. Just look at my sister now. She's a mother with a loving husband, and they just moved into a row house after we spent years in a moldy tenement apartment. Don't look at Henry's arrival as a reminder of what you lost, William. Look at him as your ace. You can teach him about horses. He'd love to learn. And as for me, I don't ever expect to take Alana's place, but I would appreciate feeling welcome. William held her gaze intently. You are welcome. It's my stupid heart that gets confused, and then my tongue lashes out. Harper offered him a small smile. We've both lost too much in this life, William. Why don't we take what we have and make the best of it? I've never wanted children. In fact, I despise the mere thought of spending all my time caring for one. But with Henry, I can't help but want to care for him. Let him come and live with us. Let us be a family. 3 broken souls might just make for a happy family. William took a step back and shook his head firmly. No, I already told you I don't want children in the house. It's hard enough seeing the boy every day. I don't want to be reminded of what I lost every time I move through my own house. Before Harper could apologize for pushing a little too hard, William turned and walked away. She stood in the kitchen, feeling as if their relationship had taken leaps in the right direction just before she managed to have herself pushed off a ledge. A heavy sigh escaped her, wondering if she and William would ever be able to see eye to eye. She wasn't sure what hurt her more, knowing that William was afraid of loving again, or knowing that she already loved him. But at least, she consoled herself, she had met the real William today. Not a man who had closed himself off from the world and emotions, but a man who had grief in his eyes and revealed that the loss had broken his heart. Chapter 21. 25th December 1882, Dukestone Ranch. I think that's everything. Now the men can just grill the beef and we'll have ourselves a feast, Anne announced, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. Goodness, look at all this food. I don't think I've ever seen this much food in my life, Harper exclaimed as her eyes scanned the table laden with all the salads, breads, and pies they had baked for the occasion. I know, I just hope it's enough, Anne shrugged. Last year, Consuela helped me, but we did not cater enough, Anne admitted. Harper had been wondering about Consuela's role on the ranch ever since that first day she had cooked for them. She had met her a few times and found the older lady to be kind, if a little brusque. Did Consuela help around the house and with the cooking before I came? Anne laughed. Goodness, no. Consuela's more comfortable on horseback than being indoors. I had a few nannies over the years, but for the last year, it's just been me. But that first night when I arrived, she cooked? Harper asked curiously. Anne nodded. Yes, Hank asked her to. I have a hit-and-miss reputation when it comes to cooking. Some nights it's a win, and other nights it's been a miss. Hank was afraid of me cooking and you feeling obliged to eat, although it tasted horrible, Harper laughed. I hardly doubt you could cook anything horrible. Believe me, I can. Anne said convincingly. Come, let's set the tables outside, and then it's time to dress. Dress? But I am dressed, Harper asked confused. Anne smiled at her with a sympathetic frown. Didn't you dress up for Christmas? Wear a nice dress and do your hair? I only ever had no more than 3 dresses. I only bought more before I came here, Harper admitted. Then I'll lend you one of mine. I have the perfect one in mind. I'll have to talk to William about buying you more clothes. Anne said firmly. That won't be necessary, Harper insisted, as they collected the white and red checkered tablecloths they needed before heading to the garden. There were 5 long tables that the ranch hands had set up for them, making Harper wonder how many people would come for Christmas lunch. As she laid the first tablecloth and smoothed it over with her hands, she heard a little boy's laughter coming from the side of the house. Curious, she moved in that direction. She had nearly reached the corner of the house when she saw Henry laughing at something William had said. They were standing in the center of the ring with a large black mare. William put on his hat and turned to Henry to say something when the mare nudged the hat off his head. Harper laughed, just as Henry's laughter filled the air. You see, she wants to play, William explained. You want to try and put the hat on? Henry shook his head firmly, fear evident in his eyes. What is it? Anne asked, joining Harper's side. Harper nodded towards the ring. He's talking to Henry. Anne slipped her arm through the crook of Harper's elbow and sighed. He would make such a good father. See here, Henry. If you take your hand and rub it down like this, she likes it, William explained, guiding Henry's hand to rub the horse from the shoulder down. Harper could see the fear in Henry's eyes and held her breath as Henry touched the horse. Henry looked up at William with such admiration that it made Harper's heart swell with love. It didn't bite me, mister. William shook his head as an easy smile curved his mouth. A horse is a gentle creature. A horse won't harm you unless it can sense that you want to harm it first. And Henry, call me William. Henry nodded as he rubbed the horse again, this time without William's hand to guide him. Now, go on and walk away from her. She's going to follow you, 'cause she wants you to do it again, William encouraged. Henry turned and began to walk away. Henry would be none the wiser, but Harper noticed the command that William gave the mare. The mare turned and slowly began to follow Henry. If there had been a better way to make Henry feel at ease with the horses, Harper wouldn't have thought it. Look how happy Henry is, Harper gushed as tears welled in her eyes. Look how happy William is, Anne said with quiet joy. Henry turned to see that the mare had followed him, and he laughed with such joy that it brought more tears to Harper's eyes. William might not be ready to be a father to another son, but she wondered if he realized the huge impact his attention had made in Henry's life today. Come on, take the reins and lead her back to her stall, William instructed Henry from where he leaned against the side of the ring. Henry rushed towards William, and before William knew what was happening, Harper began to laugh, knowing he was about to get one of Henry's loving hugs. William stood with his hands in the air, unsure for a moment how to react. Finally, he slowly lowered his arms and rested his hands on Henry's shoulders. Harper could tell that it was an emotional moment for William, one that didn't need any spectators. She turned to Anne and summoned a bright smile. Come, let's go braid each other's hair. Yes, let's do, Anne all but skipped back inside. Chapter 22. Harper had never owned such a pretty dress in her entire life. The bright white dress boasted small blue flowers and a blue ribbon tied at the waist. Anne had even threaded a blue ribbon through the braid in her hair. She felt pretty and happy as she served the food she and Anne had been preparing for days. The ranch hands had brought their families out for day, and the garden was filled with laughter and smiles as everyone celebrated Christmas in the Dukestone Ranch way. For a moment, Harper thought of Grace and Jack and baby Jacob in New York and how cold it would be there. But here it was a warm day, bathed in lovely sunshine. The weather was as perfect as the morning had been, Harper thought to herself, as she saw Henry sitting with a group of children. She realized that she needed to accept William's decision on Henry not living with them. She was grateful that he at least no longer treated Henry as if he didn't exist at all. Harper could see what a difference this morning had made for Henry, who seemed more confident and almost stood taller because of it. Harper wasn't sure where William had disappeared, but she seemed to be the only one who missed his presence. After the honesty she had seen in his eyes and the kindness he had shown this morning towards Henry, Harper knew that she had misjudged William. He was a kind and generous man, but one who had lost and struggled to find his way back again. When a wagon came around the corner, everyone began to sing Jingle Bells. Harper couldn't help but be confused. William was driving the wagon and stopped it beneath a large tree. He stood on the wagon and waited for everyone to fall silent before he began to speak. Today, we celebrate Christmas the Dukestone Ranch way. We feast on food that has been provided to us by nature. We accept our blessings from the Lord and praise Him for another year's grace. Like my pa before me, I know how much work and care goes into this ranch every day. I know how long the nights can be when we've got a wolf pack on the hunt, and I know how difficult the prairie can become when you've been driving cattle for days. I want to thank every ranch hand, every family member, and every person who made another year on Dukestone Ranch possible. This is a small gesture of my appreciation and a reminder that although we celebrate today, to remember Christ our Lord in our lives every day for the year to come. William jumped off the wagon and the ranch hands and their families moves towards the wagon, each person only taking one item. Harper stood in awe of William's generosity. Pa would have been proud. It's a tradition he started that William has kept alive all these years, Anne explained beside her. I thought you said you didn't do gifts? Harper asked. Anne nodded. We don't, but we always give to the ranch hands and their families. As the items were retrieved from the wagon, Harper was touched by the generosity and practicality of it all. Some had taken a pair of new working boots, others a new coat, and then there were those who had taken a small grocery hamper or a toy for their children. No one took more than one item, out of respect for William's kindness. I didn't forget about you, William suddenly spoke behind her. Harper had been so captivated by the scene unfolding in front of her that she hadn't even noticed him joining her and Anne. She turned around and smiled at him with admiration in her eyes. That is a lovely tradition, William. I tend to agree. Come, I'd like to show you your gift, William said with a hint of excitement in his voice. Harper was confused as she followed him towards the house. But Anne said you didn't do gifts. I didn't get you anything. We don't, and you didn't have to, he sent. William took her hand once they were inside and led her upstairs. Harper's heart beat a mile a minute, unsure of what William had in mind. He stopped in front of the spare bedroom and opened the door. Harper's breath caught when she saw a rocking horse in front of the window. It was only then that she realized this had been Michael's room. Thank you for showing it to me, Harper said quietly, knowing how hard it must be for William to be in this room again. William smiled at her with warmth in his eyes as he turned to her. I realized last night that you were right. About what? Harper asked, confused. About fate dealing you a bad hand, only to slip in an ace when you least expect it. Only Henry wasn't my ace. You are. William's eyes held so much affection that Harper's breath caught. I asked you to come to Dukestone Ranch to get Anne off my back about finding a new wife. I thought that once you were here, we could each carry on with our own lives. But I was wrong. I thought I would be able to keep a distance between us. But again, I was wrong. Ever since the first moment I lay eyes on you, I began to fall in love with you. I tried to ignore it, even avoided you to prove to myself that you didn't mean anything. But it didn't work. It felt as if I was betraying Alana by developing feelings for you, as if I would betray the memory of her and Michael if I were to move on to be happy again. But I realized that isn't what Alana would have wanted. She would have wanted me to be happy. William, what are you saying? Harper asked carefully. She didn't want to reveal her feelings for him until she was certain he had feelings for her. In a very poor way, I'm trying to say that I have fallen in love with you, Harper. I fell in love with you when you chastened me about the way I treated you and the way I treated Henry. I fell in love with you every time you made my sister smile. And I fell even more in love with you today, knowing how much trouble you had gone through to feed people you hardly know. I don't want a partnership or a friendship. I want a real marriage, one in which we can be honest with each other, where you can tell me when I'm wrong and I can lean on you when I'm sad. My gift to you this Christmas, Harper, is my heart. Harper's eyes spilled over with emotion. You already have mine. William leaned over and brushed a soft kiss over her lips, and for the first time, Harper knew what it felt like to be happy and in love. When he drew away, he glanced at the rocking horse before he met Harper's gaze. I collected a few things from the attic during the night, things I thought Henry might like. He belongs with us, here in the house, to be raised as our son. Harper's heart exploded with joy as she flung her arms around her husband's neck. She might have doubted him and his character, but with a little patience, she had now come to learn that he was indeed the perfect husband and soon-to-be father to Henry. When she pulled back, she smiled into his eyes with her emotions on her sleeve. Merry Christmas, my husband. William returned her smile. Merry Christmas, my wife. Epilogue. 3 years later. Once upon a time, there was a sad woman living in New York and a sad rancher living in California. The woman didn't believe that she would find happiness in New York and decided to write a letter to the sad rancher. For months, they wrote to each other, neither knowing what it could possibly lead to, until one day, the sad rancher asked her to become his wife. The sad woman traveled all the way from New York by train. The journey took 4 whole days. It was a dangerous journey and a very uncomfortable one. But along the journey, she happened to meet a sad little boy who had no family. Right there and then, the sad woman decided to make the little boy hers. Together, they continued their journey to Allegria. At first, the sad man was angry that the woman had brought a little boy with her, but soon he began to understand why. Although they were all together on the ranch, they still couldn't find happiness. Until this day, 3 years ago. On that day, God smiled down on a Christmas feast like the one we're going to have later today. With the help of a little Christmas magic, the sad man, the sad woman, and the sad little boy became a family. They were no longer sad. Instead, they were overjoyed to be a family. The little boy learned how to ride a horse, and the woman, who is now a mother, learned how to take care of her family. The man, well, he learned how to open his heart to love and how to share it unconditionally. And that family, little princess, is your family. Merry Christmas, sweet little Rachel. Harper smiled as she stepped into the room. She had been standing outside, listening to Anne's retelling of how she, William, and Henry became a family. That's quite a story. Anne smiled brightly at her sister-in-law. I thought she should start her first Christmas knowing how her family came to be. Harper reached for her 6-month-old daughter and kissed her rosy cheeks. But you failed to tell her that the happy family was blessed to have you in their lives, or that God blessed them again by giving them a little girl. Rachel smiled at Harper with a gummy grin as if she understood every single word. Where are William and Henry? Anne asked, standing up. They went out for a ride. I swear, if they not back by the time the families arrive, I'm going to feed them both grits for a week. Harper laughed, shaking her head. It's hard to tell who loves the horses more, William or Henry. At least you know they both love you equally as much, Anne assured her. I'll go set the tables while you and Rachel get ready. Just a minute, young lady. Harper stopped her with a stern look. The next happy story Rachel wants to hear is how you found love. It's time to start considering all the offers of courtship you've been receiving. Anne shook her head. When it's the right man, I'll know. Until then, I'm not going to bother with wasting my time on the wrong one. What about the wrong man? William asked, peeking his head around the door. Harper and Anne laughed. Are you eavesdropping? Harper asked with a cocked brow. Perhaps. Besides, I need to know if you're confessing to my sister that you married the wrong man. William teased, stepping into the room. Henry rushed in past him and hugged Harper tightly before reaching for his sister. Can I hold her, Ma, please? Yes, just be careful and sit with her on the bed, Harper cautioned as she handed Rachel to Henry. Henry adored his little sister, just as Rachel loved her brother. Ever since that Christmas 3 years ago, when Henry had moved into the main house, he had become their son. Both William and Harper had agreed he would never feel left out if they decided to have children of their own. Anne excused herself to set the tables, leaving their little family on their own. William stepped forward and pulled Harper into his arms. Before he searched her gaze with so much love it still made Harper's breath catch. You're still the ace in my deck of cards, Harper laughed. And you're the king in mine. Merry Christmas, my love. Happy Christmas, my wife. Harper glanced around the room and felt grateful for how blessed she was. And today, she would be doubly blessed because Grace, Jack, and Jacob were arriving on the afternoon train. For the first time in 3 years, she would see her sister and have the privilege of sharing a Dukestone Ranch Christmas with her.